When after Rhett is reborn, the three beautiful, curvier widows who once died saving him are suddenly alive again, begging him to let them move in and become his wives. In his past life, he sent them away, terrified of local gossip. All three ended up dying while dragging him from a mudslide, leaving him 50 years of pure regret over that single, cowardly decision. So when Hazel Prescott asks him for a straight answer, he tells her yes, this is their home now. Anyone trying to bully them will face him. He is Rhett Winslow, 27 again, back in his old farmhouse during the freezing winter of 1980. His hands are young, the mud-plastered walls that collapsed in his first life still stand secure. Hazel is alive and incredibly close. The bold widow and the youngest sister wait anxiously by the door. They would have to leave before dark if he refused. With no other shelter in the cold, the youngest tries to thank him, but her growling stomach cuts the sentence in half. She blushes furiously. The bold widow looks away to spare her sister's pride, while Hazel quietly closes her eyes. Rhett asks when they last ate. Hazel hesitates, mentioning yesterday morning, but the youngest silently shakes her head. Hazel's jaw tightens as she admits it has been 2 days. She still searches his face, wondering if he really means all three of them. Rhett confirms the house belongs to everyone now. No one is getting thrown back into the snow. Think about it. Starvation does not care how dignified a lie sounds. It always gives you away eventually. Rhett crosses the cold, smoke-stained kitchen and kneels near the firewood, pulling away 3 split logs. Beneath them, a small pit sits covered with worn cloth, containing roughly 10 pounds of sweet potatoes. The youngest stares into the stash, completely amazed. He assures her they belong to everyone. Rhett had hidden them because he was abandoned as a baby and raised as cheap farm labor. His adoptive mother gave her biological sons the houses, fields, and family pride, while Rhett only received the hard work. He carries the potatoes to the stove and fills a pot. Hazel tends the fire. The bold widow scrubs the dirt, while the youngest holds each clean potato tightly, terrified someone might snatch it away. In his first life, Rhett married a good, loving woman who accepted his empty, run-down house. But when she fell terribly ill, his adoptive mother locked away the grain and refused any medical help. He borrowed money, sold his own blood, yet still buried her. Only these 3 widows helped when his own family refused. Hazel carried water, the bold widow washed clothes, and the youngest stayed through the entire burial after everyone else had abandoned him. Now the water begins to heat. They all understood harsh rejection too. Hazel had been sold off to a dying invalid. The bold widow married a sick man, and the youngest was given to someone who could barely survive. Soon, every husband died, leaving them completely rejected by both families. The cruel village called them husband killers, making them targets for desperate men. Rhett drops the first potatoes into the pot. In his first life, they came here begging for protection, but he turned. He spent the next 50 years alone, becoming an elite hunter who mastered shooting, tracking, cooking, and survival. Sadly, those skills arrived far too late for them. Then he died old and alone, yet his next breath came inside a house that should have been rubble. His hands were young. Hazel was actually alive in 1980. Saying yes fixed his past cowardice. Feeding 3 starving women was his first bill. Once the potatoes finished boiling, all 4 of them sat around his rough wooden table. Hazel pushed the largest potato his way. You found them, so eat first. But he split it 4 ways. We eat together, first rule of the house. Hearing this, Hazel swallowed tears. The bold widow burned her tongue, pretending she had not. Meanwhile, the youngest saved half in her hand. Finish it, Rhett insisted. She wanted to save it, but he would find tomorrow's food tomorrow. The bold widow surveyed the empty, barren kitchen. That is confident. Give me until sunset, Rhett replied. Hazel's mouth twitched. 1 day in. You are showing off. 3 beautiful women watched him like he had invented dinner. His young body definitely noticed, but he stayed quiet since survival had already given him enough problems. The youngest finally ate, while Hazel touched the table and whispered that this was a family meal. Rhett stood up before things became a crying contest. Take the bed, he said. I will sleep on the floor. Instantly, all 3 women froze. That night, inside the only bedroom, that single bed caused a brand new problem. He spread a blanket on the floor. Suddenly, cloth rustled behind him. When he turned, Hazel had loosened her coat. The other 2 were doing the same. Honestly, he faced the wall so fast, he nearly head-butted it. What are you doing? He gasped. Hazel forced the words out, keeping their side of the bargain. The bold widow kept her voice steady. We know what people Expect when three women ask one man for shelter. The youngest whispered that they would not complain. Hunger had taught them that safety always came with a price. Rhett turned back and gently pulled Hazel's coat, closed, before she could open it any further. No, Rhett said. Hazel went pale. Do you not want us? I want you safe. That does not buy your bodies. The bold widow stared at him in disbelief. Then what do you want tonight? Sleep. Tomorrow he wanted meat, firewood, and winter clothes. The youngest blinked. Is that all? That is plenty. He was one man with one bed and 6 potatoes. Respect the difficulty setting, he joked. The bold widow laughed before she could stop herself. Good. The room needed air. He pointed to the bed. You sleep there. While he slept on the floor. Nobody owed him anything. Hazel caught his sleeve. Rhett, people will talk. People also talked while you starved, he countered. He did not take orders from people who just watched it happen. She released him slowly. The bold widow pulled her coat tight again, remarking that he was either decent or very strange. Those options can easily share a roof. Hazel gave him a tired look. You joke now. He nearly died facing the wall, so he had definitely earned one. The youngest covered a small smile. Some of the lingering fear finally left her face. He lay on the floor with his back to them. The 3 women quietly climbed onto the bed, fully dressed and tightly pressed against the far edge. A wide strip of empty mattress stayed between them. Nobody spoke for several minutes. He had finally done one thing right, and the hard floor made sure he did not become too proud about it. The bold widow was Lorna Whitby, the one who had laughed first, and she carefully checked the loose window latch before lying down. The youngest was Millie Carroll, whose growling stomach had exposed their hunger, yet she still folded the spare coat beneath Hazel's head and insisted she did not need a pillow. Hazel Prescott was the composed one who had demanded Rhett's answer. She sat near the door, shielding the others from any potential threat. Hazel pulled the blanket over Millie, while Lorna wedged a stool under the loose window latch. Rhett moved that stool to the door to block any intruder. Hazel watched him test it, asking if he meant to keep them. He did. She nodded once and lay down. That was the first answer she accepted without searching Rhett's face for lies. The woman who raised him was Martha Winslow, and he knew she would show up the moment she smelled food, money, or freedom. Martha had 3 annoying talents. Behind him, the widows whispered. Lorna whispered that her paper marriage was never real. Wedding bed. Millie admitted hers had not either. Hazel said illness ended hers first. No payment. Hazel reminded them none of it was payment Rhett could collect. Lorna's voice sharpened. He did not ask for anything, and they would not turn on him later. Hazel agreed they must stand together. Then Millie's voice followed, noting he gave them a home. Their voices dropped. He caught nothing more. He did not pretend he had either. What he heard was enough. They were promising to stand together. Rhett kept his eyes closed and left the rest private. Before sunrise, he woke up with one shoulder completely numb and his dignity buried somewhere under the stove. Empty bed. Outside, Hazel swept the yard. Lorna had washed their clothes, hanging them up. Millie scrubbed the pot with both hands. The yard looked less abandoned now. Hazel cleared the flue. Lorna patched his spare shirt. Millie stacked the firewood by size. They had even saved half a sweet potato for him. It sat on a cracked plate beneath a clean cloth. 3 women who had arrived starving had protected his share. He reached for Hazel's broom. She turned her back and kept sweeping. He reached for Lorna's wet shirt. She lifted it out of reach. Millie hugged the cooking pot to her chest. Apparently they were territorial. Rhett picked up the potato. Asking who was trying to starve again, Millie pointed at Lorna. Lorna pointed at Hazel. Hazel kept sweeping, telling Rhett to eat. 3 widows had formed a conspiracy before breakfast. Honestly, even elite squads showed less coordination. Rhett took one bite, reminding them they did not need to work before sunrise. Lorna wrung his shirt, replying they had a roof and wanted to clean. Millie lowered her eyes, whispering they needed to earn food. No, Rhett told her they can help because this was their home. Rent is not paid with hunger or fear. Hazel stopped sweeping to look at him, noting he kept making rules. Someone has to, he replied. Your first breakfast policy was criminal. That earned another small smile from Millie. Good, he thought. Smiles were cheaper than medicine and they were broke. Rhett finished the potato and checked their hands. Hazel's fingers were split from the cold. Lorna's knuckles were raw from washing. Millie's sleeves ended above her wrists. Rhett took the wash basin from Lorna, moving it much closer to the hot stove. Then he wrapped the broom handle with cloth so Hazel's split fingers would stop rubbing bare wood. Millie watched both repairs and quietly pulled her sleeves lower. Hazel pulled back, saying they had endured worse. That is a terrible standard, Lorna countered, glancing at his coat. His was not exactly luxurious. Millie whispered she had a point. Rhett looked at her, warningly. One full meal, already they were ganging up on him. Millie's mouth curved. Maybe she learned fast. 2 smiles and a mutiny before sunrise. Household was recovering quickly, but let's face it, meat alone wouldn't survive winter. Skins, firewood, and cash. He looked toward the white mountain beyond Cedar Hollow. In his first life, he had learned every ridge, game trail, and safe. Crossing up there, the skill remained. His young body just had to prove it. Could keep up, so he pulled his old bow from the rafters to check the string. 2 arrows were warped, another had loose feathers. He kept only the good ones. That could fly straight, enough for food, assuming he did not waste a single shot. Hazel stopped sweeping, asking if he was heading up to the mountain. He promised food by sunset. Lorna leaned against the wash line, claiming they were just teasing. Millie disagreed, gripping her wet cloth. That mountain had already taken his family from him once. None of them remembered that past life, but he did. Snow was coming, and by sunset they needed meat. That morning in the clean yard, he strapped on his bow. The pantry held only 6 potatoes, and snow was coming. Hazel blocked the gate, holding her hand over the jade pendant at her throat. It was the only valuable thing any of the women still owned. The North Slope is dangerous after snow, Hazel warned him, pulling the pendant free to offer it. She pressed it into Rhett's palm. It had belonged to her late mother, and she believed it protected travelers. Rhett tried to return it, saying she had already given him trust. Hazel closed his fingers around the jewelry, telling him to bring it home safely. That sounded suspiciously like a leash to him. Her eyes narrowed immediately. Come back alive, Rhett, she insisted, then they could discuss the leash. Lorna coughed. To hide a laugh, Millie did not even bother. Already he was losing arguments 3-1. He tucked the precious pendant under his shirt. Hazel stepped aside but caught his sleeve first, whispering that meat would not be worth his life. To 4 hungry people, it was worth a careful mourning. The answer did not satisfy her, but it was the truth. Rhett left Cedar Hollow before sunrise, carrying the same old bow he used as a poor young farmer. He still possessed 50 years of hunting memories, knowing tracks, wind, and blood. Bad weather was familiar, along with rich clients who thought cash could scare off bears. Halfway up the ridge, Hazel's pendant grew hot against his chest. He stopped near Cedar to pull it out. Green light flooded his hand, then the mountain vanished. Talk about a twist. He landed on soft grass under a clear sky. Beyond a fenced animal pen, with a spring shining beside a modern 2-story house. This place had no business existing in 1980. Rhett stood with his bow raised. No enemy appeared at the front porch. Instead, a calm voice spoke from empty air. The hidden homestead has accepted you, it said. He lowered his bow. Why me? The pendant carried the door, and his restored body matched the key. Hazel had carried it without knowing its secret. He still did not know who built this place, and dinner had a tight deadline. Naturally, he muttered, heading inside. He went hunting and somehow inherited a magical farm. The front door opened itself. The house featured clean rooms and running water, with an incredibly high-end kitchen. Rhett opened the refrigerator. Empty. Of course it was. No miracle came that easily. His property, not a free lunch. The caretaker gave him only the essential rules. He could enter by thought alone. Nobody outside could ever follow him. Inside, time matched the mountain. Food stayed fresh, and a mirror showed the entrance. It showed the exact spot he left, letting him check before stepping back out. He knelt by the spirit spring and drank deeply, cold water hitting his stomach. Warmth flooded his muscles. The deep fatigue from sleeping on the hard floor vanished. His breathing deepened. Old aches completely vanished. Every sound sharpened. He could even hear water flowing beneath the thick grass. He gripped the stone edge, and a corner crumbled instantly in his hand. The caretaker voice reminded him that the spring restores whatever time has weakened. Testing his body, he drew the bow fully without a single shake. He leaped the low fence easily. His eyes picked out individual leaves far away. His reflection was still the same, just looking incredibly healthy and vital now. The gray exhaustion of hunger was gone. Good, he muttered quietly. His old body had too many complaints. Suddenly, the voice asked something else. It urged him to use the harvest to help people, not hoard it. He thought of 3 women saving half a potato for him. He agreed. Enough ceremony, they had dinner to catch. He pictured the cedar tree. The hidden homestead released him beside it. Only a few minutes had passed. Heading uphill, fresh rabbit tracks crossed the snow, and he followed them immediately. He waited beside a burrow and took the first rabbit cleanly. Suddenly, a pheasant flushed, but his second arrow dropped it mid-flight. He touched both animals, instantly sending them straight into the hidden homestead. They vanished from the snow and appeared inside the cool storage room. Checking the trail behind him, there was no carcass or heavy weight. Just clean snow and a secret that nobody could ever track down. The trick saved weight. By noon, several rabbits and pheasants waited inside. His first life skills still worked, and his younger hands obeyed quickly. The new body changed the pace, crossing slopes that once required rest. He held the draw longer and heard animals before they ever broke cover. But that power had a catch if he returned carrying everything. The village would see an impossible hunter instead of a lucky farmer. And he found tracks wider than his hand. A massive wild boar was nearby. Judging by depth, it weighed nearly 300 pounds, meat and money. Leather, fat, and enough potential trouble to make the village ask questions. He followed broken branches into a clearing, spotting it beneath an oak. It dug through frozen ground, shoulders rising higher than his waist. He had only one clean angle. The beast lifted its head, then lowered it again. It shifted weight into its front legs. He waited, drew, and watched. He let it turn, driving an arrow behind its shoulder. It charged anyway. Dirt kicked up under its hooves. He held ground until the tusk filled his eyes. He stepped aside. The beast tore past, ran 20 yards, and collapsed. His sleeve fluttered from the near miss, close enough to respect. But far enough to win. His first major kill of this second life took one arrow. He touched the carcass, moving it to the homestead before blood drew predators. He had barely stored the giant boar when 5 hungry wolves stepped out of the shadows. They had followed the fresh blood trail. 2 came from his left, while 3 blocked the path. The nearest wolf lowered its head, preparing to strike. The rule here was simple. His quiver was running low. 5 wolves only needed him to make one mistake. The first wolf sprang. He shot its chest, then quickly spun to hit the second rushing close. Both fell, but the remaining 3 charged together. He instantly thought of his hidden homestead. The clearing vanished a heartbeat before their sharp teeth could tear into him. Inside the safe haven, he stumbled across the grass and spun toward the mirror. Outside, 3 wolves crashed through empty air. One slammed headfirst into a massive oak. Talk about losing your cool. He respected predators, but that beast got completely folded. The mirror showed them circling his exact exit point. They couldn't enter or see him. He waited until one finally turned its back. Then, he slipped right back outside. Loosing an arrow, he vanished once more before the other 2 could even react. The third wolf collapsed. The survivors backed away from the empty air, terrified. They wanted lunch. Instead, they got a disappearing old man in a young body. Checking the mirror, he stepped behind the oak once more and let another arrow fly. 4 down, the last wolf bolted uphill, but he followed close behind. His enhanced body made the chase completely unfair. He easily read its next turn in the snow. The final arrow caught the beast right between the shoulders before it reached the ridge. Finally, he stood alone in the quiet clearing, catching his breath for once. The trick worked, but it cost 5 valuable arrows and risked exposing his sanctuary's defense. Just minutes ago, 5 wolves had surrounded him in the cold. Now he owned 5 pristine winter pelts, beautiful, valuable, and completely impossible to explain. He stored the carcasses inside, then quickly washed the bloodstains off his clothes. Looking over his haul, he counted one massive 300-pound boar. 5 wolves and plenty of small game. It was a ridiculous amount of food. Far more than any poor farmer in Cedar Hollow could ever gather in a month. If he brought this home, Martha would be waiting at his gate with the whole village. They would quickly notice his small house held way too much expensive meat. So he hid the massive haul, keeping the boar and wolves safely stashed inside. He left with just 2 simple rabbits hanging from his belt. That looked normal. A boar and 5 wolves would bring unwanted questions. Near sunset, he strolled back into Cedar Hollow. Hazel spotted him first. She dropped her broom and rushed out, with Lorna following close behind. Lorna still gripped a kitchen knife, while Millie nearly tripped trying to keep up. Hazel grabbed him by the shoulders, desperately asking where he was hurt. He promised he was fine, but her hand immediately found the hidden jade pendant. She let out a long sigh of relief. He admitted he was attached to it. Lorna smirked, noting the leash worked, but Hazel just ignored her completely. Instead, she searched his collar for blood as Lorna circled to check his back. Lorna ordered him to turn, but he joked he brought dinner, not a checkup. She argued that being late demanded a search, while Millie touched a rabbit. Staring in shock, Millie asked if he killed both. He just claimed he got lucky. Hazel stared at the clean arrow holes, muttering that his excuse was getting old. She was totally right, but he used it anyway. The women found zero blood on him. Fear melts into relief, then pride. Millie rubs the soft rabbit fur. It is still warm, that is how fresh works. Millie looks up, offended. Just for a moment, the catch impressed him, but she says he is under inspection. Rhett tells them to take their time. He brought dinner. She smiles. The shy boy has teeth. Lorna lifts a rabbit. He promised food by sunset, and the sun is still visible. Barely, Lorna squints at the ridge. Still counts, though. Hazel shakes her head. But Hazel keeps a hand on Rhett's sleeve as they walk inside. That is entirely new. In his first life, nobody waited at the gate. Nobody checked if he returned in one piece. He cuts that memory short. The rabbits need skinning right away. That evening in the smoke-black kitchen, he braises one rabbit and makes bone soup. The second rabbit stays hidden in the cold shed as tomorrow's believable meal. The rich aroma fills the entire farmhouse. Millie holds her bowl with both hands. Taking one sip, she closes her eyes. She refuses to put it down. Tears slip down her cheeks. She does not even notice them. Lorna tears off some meat, sliding half into Hazel's bowl. Hazel pushes it back, telling her to eat. Lorna pushes it toward Millie instead. She is the smallest. Millie frowns. She is sitting right there. It is a relief to see them finally arguing like normal people again. They actually expect another meal now. Rhett divides the meat again, making them eat. Millie tries to hide a piece for breakfast. Rhett catches her hand before she can. She looks guilty. He asks if this is a new habit and tells her to eat. Eat tonight, he says, trust tomorrow to me. Lorna watches them closely. She deliberately takes a second piece. Hazel follows. It is a tiny but dangerous choice. Hazel finally looks at Rhett through the rising steam, admitting he truly can hunt. He credits a good teacher. Hazel leans forward, teasing him about bad decisions. Lorna laughs while Millie smiles behind her bowl. Rhett raises his, making a promise. This is just the beginning. They will have enough food, firewood, and clothes. Hazel holds his gaze, warning him not to make promises that could kill him. He only promises what he can do. Outside, the wind carries the smell. The wolves failed to steal his food, but other greedy people are about to try. Just as they finally eat, the worst kind of neighbor stops outside the gate. She is married to Martha's favored son and is the town's biggest gossip. Smelling the meat, she spots the three widows sitting at his table. That is 2 scandals for the price of 1. Rhett catches her watching them. Her face peers through the fence slats. She counts the women, then the bowls. Her greedy eyes lock onto the rabbit meat like she has struck gold. Darlene could have easily kept walking and minded her own business at home. But that was never going to happen. She lifts her skirt from the snow. She sprints toward Martha's house, shouting before she even reaches the yard. Rabbit at Rhett's house, she screams. Lorna asks if she is family. Family, Rhett replies. Hazel sets down her spoon, saying that sounds even worse. They barely finish half before the front gate slams wide open. Martha Winslow marches in first. She is the cruel adoptive mother who raised him. Darlene follows closely behind, pointing an accusing finger directly at their crowded table. Look, she shouts, he has rabbit while his own family goes hungry. Martha does not ask questions. She has found her target. Rules are only for people with shame. She kicks the gate wide, glaring at the women. 3 husband killers eating in her son's house. Do you have no decency? Martha yells. Then she points at Millie. You were thrown out for bringing death to one family, she snaps. Now you come here to drain another family dry. Millie's hand tightens around her bowl. Broth runs over her fingers as Hazel stands up, blocking Martha's path completely. Lorna moves right beside Millie, her shoulders squared. They had only just arrived. They arrived hungry and terrified, and now they are standing as one. Martha sneers at the sight. Look at them, already acting like wives, she mocks. The insult stings, but it only makes all 3 women freeze right in their tracks. He steps right between Martha and the table. Martha's mouth drops open in pure shock. You order your mother out. You stopped being my mother when my wife died, he snaps. The neighbors out in the lane hear everything. 2 slow down, then 3 more stop. Perfect, Martha wanted to use peer pressure, and now she has plenty of witnesses. She jabs a finger at his chest. I raised you from nothing, she shrieks. But you raised me in the shadow of your other 2 sons, he fires back. They got the land while I worked the fields and gave you every single penny. She tries to interrupt, but he snaps. When my wife fell sick, you locked the grain. He sold blood until he could barely walk. The village cooperative lent him funeral money. They buried her while he owed every dollar, and your grain stayed completely dry. The lane goes dead silent. Martha looks around, but absolutely nobody steps up for her. Your wife was already dying anyway, Martha snaps. Why waste good grain on her? Hazel gasps. Martha just said the quiet part out loud as he steps closer. That sentence is exactly why you will never touch my table again, he warns. Hazel's face hardens. Lorna puts a hand on Millie's shoulder as he points at them. These women carried water, washed clothes, and stayed through the funeral, he says. You did not. Martha lowers her finger as the older villagers outside begin whispering. That is true, one says. Another woman calls out, we all saw him beg. Nobody calls him ungrateful. The older villagers keep their eyes locked on Martha. Martha drops the food argument entirely and pivots to attack the women instead. You are living with 3 widows before your wife's grave is even cold, she snaps. The whole village will know what you are, she warns as Darlene smirks. Gossip is her specialty. She leans past Martha, wearing a nasty grin. People will say this house is filthy, 3 women living with one single man. I will make sure everyone hears by breakfast, Darlene sneers. Hazel steps forward, but he stops her. His first life memory held one ugly detail about Darlene. He needs her to keep talking. He wants the whole lane to hear the threat. Darlene mistakes his silence for fear. She gets bold. I will tell everyone they trade favors for food, she adds. The wives will hear it, and every market cart will carry the news. Let us see who lets them near a respectable home after that. That threat could cost them work, food, and any chance at shelter. It could leave them completely homeless again. Millie's face drains of color. Lorna's jaw tightens. He lets Darlene enjoy her smug confidence for just one more second. Are you finished? He asks. She lifts her chin. I have barely started. Good. Before you discuss respectable homes, ask the man you pretend not to know. Ask Buck Tiller about the mole under his left hip. Darlene's smile vanishes. Martha turned slowly, asking who Buck Tiller was. Darlene backed into the gate, muttering nobody. Then why did your face change? He asked. Martha grabbed her arm, demanding how Rhett could know about a mole under another man's clothes. Darlene panicked, screaming in terror. Don't ask me that, she cried. Everyone laughed, and a boy in the back mocked her. His mother yanked him away, laughing even harder. One neighbor who had been nodding along with Martha stepped across the lane, putting distance. Between them, 2 wives shifted their children away from Darlene. A woman muttered that respectable homes should start with respectable wives. Millie saw the movement, and some color returned to her face. Talk about a massive backfire. Darlene came to accuse 3 widows, but only proved her own affair to the entire lane. Martha stared at Darlene, then moved her grip from Darlene's arm to the back of her coat. You shameless woman, Martha hissed. Your husband works all day while you run around with Buck Tiller. Darlene yanked her arm free, claiming Rhett was lying. Lorna quickly fired back, asking how she knew which mole he meant. Darlene opened her mouth, speechless. Beautiful. Originally, this scandal broke years later, but this time, since Darlene threatened the women under his roof, he used the truth. Now every listener was staring at Darlene instead of the widows. Martha forgot the rabbit for nearly 10 seconds, but then she reached for it anyway, lunging for the bowl. He caught it first, lifting it away. That meat belongs to the family Winslow's. Martha barked. He countered that it belonged to those who lived here. Martha struck her chest, yelling she was his mother. He just moved her face twisted. You deny me a bite. He would deny her a single grain. When she reached again, he pulled it away. If she was desperate to eat something from his property, the toilet was behind the shed. He was sure it had a share for her. The laughter outside became vicious. Darlene covered her face as Martha stood in his yard, one hand extended toward the rabbit she could not touch. A woman outside lifted her own bowl out of Martha's reach on pure instinct. Another villager laughed and copied the motion. Martha saw every hand move away. For years, her hand had entered his grain sack, his pay envelope, and his kitchen. This time it closed on air. The whole lane watched him refuse her. An older man near the gate shook his head. Martha, the family separated after the funeral. You cannot keep claiming his table. A woman beside him looked at the widows, saying they helped his wife more than you did. Several villagers stepped closer to his side of the gate. Martha saw them move, pointing at him with a shaking hand, spitting that he would regret choosing outsiders over blood. But those outsiders showed up when blood did not. Darlene tried to slip through the gate, but Martha seized her sleeve dragging her away. Darlene stumbled after her while the crowd laughed about Buck Tiller's mole. He shut the damaged gate behind them for one quiet second. The yard held only the four of them. Then Millie threw her arms round his waist. Hazel hugged him from one side and Lorna joined from the other, nearly driving the air out of his lungs. He had survived 5 wolves that morning, but 3 grateful widows almost finished the job with affection. Millie spoke against his coat, whispering this happened because of them. No, he told her. He fought these battles years before they came. They had better get used to being treated. Well, Millie pulled back. She will return, and she will lose again. Hazel looked up. You lost your family today, she said, but those people only used the word. That is different. Lorna's grip tightened around his arm. What are we? She asked. He looked at the 3 women filling his house. Honestly, a major breathing problem. Lorna laughed through wet eyes and loosened her hold. Then he answered her properly. They were the ones who stayed. Lorna wiped her eyes, looking toward the shed, asking if he truly offered her the toilet. He shrugged. He offered options. Lorna counted on one finger. That was only one option. The intruder was not listening well. Hazel tried to look disapproving, but her mouth betrayed her. Perfect. The house had survived its first invasion. Honestly, seeing them laughing instead of packing is just wholesome. He made them sit and finish the rabbit before it cooled. Millie still watched the gate between bites. He moved her chair so her back faced the wall. Lorna noticed but did not comment. She simply took the seat nearest the door. Hazel found a strip of cloth and wrapped Millie's broth-burned fingers. Her hand stayed steady, but her eyes kept returning to the broken latch. He promised to repair it tomorrow. Hazel tied the knot, telling him to repair it tonight. He looked out at the darkness. You are pretty strict for a guest. Her eyes met his. You called this our home, she reminded him. Fair. Hazel remembered every promise. He fixed the latch before sitting again. It clicked shut. The next intruder would have to break something and announce their crime. Hazel divided the remaining meat equally, including his portion this time. Millie hid nothing in her sleeve. Progress. Nobody saved the largest piece for a man who had already eaten. After the yard emptied and the women slept, he went to the well. His hidden homestead had given him one more way to protect them. He entered by thought, filling a small jar from the spirit spring, returning beside the well. Then he poured a diluted amount into the household water. The caretaker had warned him that pure spring water would change another person too fast. Mixed thinly, it would strengthen them slowly without exposing his secret. He lowered the bucket and stirred the well once. The hidden homestead remained his alone to know. The stronger water belonged to all 4 of them. He thought throwing Martha out had ended the meat fight, but next time she came for his food, she brought the whole village to watch. Talk about a hostile takeover. By dawn, he left with one thin shirt, a hidden boar, and a $1,000 funeral debt. Hazel stood by the gate in his patched coat. He had put it around her after seeing her shiver. She tried to give it back. You will freeze on the cart. The spring had left him warm enough to cheat the cold. Hazel had no such advantage. He kept quiet, gently tightening the coat around her shoulders. Keep it until I return, he told her. Hazel caught his wrist. Return with your arms still attached. She liked the coat better that way. Lorna leaned against the wall one night on the floor, and he already has a woman dressing him. He replied that in his defense, Hazel wore poverty better than he did. Hazel's cheeks warmed while Millie hid a smile behind both hands. Then Hazel pushed a cloth bag into his chest. Inside sat the last sweet potatoes and one cold rabbit leg. Hazel glanced at the repaired gate, asking if Martha would bring more people next time. He slung the bag over his shoulder. They would probably need buyers. Hazel orders him to take food first, making sure he is fully prepared. He quickly agrees to her demands, making Lorna whistle in amusement. Knowing he is outnumbered, he prepares as Clyde's cart arrives soon after. They ride toward town together, with Cedar Hollow's cart driver. Clyde knows every rumor within 10 miles and immediately pieces the puzzle together. He already knows what is happening before our protagonist even sits down. When told the widows are living with him, Clyde grins widely. That answer will feed the village gossip for a week, but he remains unfazed. Clyde laughs, snapping the reins as they pick up some local village women. These ladies have mocked his empty house for years, staring at his patched clothes. One mockingly asks if his 3 widows have eaten him poor yet. He looks back at the empty road, dryly noting he doesn't see them helping. That shuts her up instantly, while Clyde silently shakes with laughter. A mile later, Clyde warns him that Martha will keep spreading nasty rumors. He needs a simple, clean answer that the villagers can repeat easily. Instead, he points out he already gave her one, the legendary toilet answer. Clyde nearly drops the reins before giving him some actually useful advice. Village Chief Earl Blevins can register the women as household helpers. That official title would strip away her excuse, no more gossip. Plus, Earl witnessed his family splitting up years ago. He also managed the cooperative loan right after the man's wife passed. If Martha wants to rally the village, he will hit them with hard facts. Arriving in town, he slips some cash to the guard of the black market. Out here, cold cash rules without any need for annoying ration coupons. It is highly illegal, but winter meat is worth the risk of prison. The guard smirks at his empty hands, assuming he is just another poor farmer. Most broke peasants only come to buy a bit of grain or sell a rabbit. Ducking behind an empty shed, he accesses his magical hidden homestead. Placing his hands on the massive boar, he prepares to bring it out. He emerges carrying almost 300 pounds of solid meat on his shoulders. The smug guard freezes, and a stunned butcher asks if he carried that alone. He dryly replies that the boar helped him walk up until the last hill. The butcher realizes he is dead serious and calls over 2 other buyers. An initial offer of $8 a pound gets instantly shrugged off. He threatens to find someone with better eyes, prompting a $9 bid. Still walking, he waits until the 3rd buyer slaps the scale. Accepting the $10 bid, they quickly get to work skinning it. While keeping the hide, 290 pounds of meat sells. The butcher counts out $2,900, making his assistant double-check. Staring at his patched shirt, the assistant counts the bills slowly. He leaves with $2,900 and the hide over his shoulder. Talk about a massive payday. He just made 3 years of wages before breakfast. He enjoys the feeling for exactly 6 seconds. Then, winter demands its cut. Immediately, he forks over $270 on required ration coupons. Placing them beside his cash, the grain seller instantly starts loading the flour. He got cornmeal, oil, salt, and sugar. The seller stopped haggling and packed. Potatoes, corn, beans, and winter vegetables. He headed straight to the animal stalls next. He bought chicks, ducklings, and 2 breeding rabbits. The seller looked closely. Looking from the cages to Rhett's patched shirt, he asked if he was starting a zoo. Breakfast, Rhett replied. The seller hugged the money like he had just been saved. The caretaker had said crops and animals grew faster inside the hidden homestead. Behind the stalls, he mentally moved the cages and seeds through the secret door. That single boar hide was now a food engine. At the fabric stall he bought soap, thick cotton, and 3 bright bolts, deep blue for Hazel, red for Lorna, and green for Millie. The seller held up the red bolt, asking about his wife. Complicated, Rhett admitted. The seller lifted the other 2, raising his eyebrows. By afternoon, he climbed onto Clyde's cart with food sacks, cotton, and soap. 3 bright cloth bolts sat beneath the boar hide. The same village women stared. One woman quietly shifted her basket so the beautiful fabric would not touch it. Then she glanced at the other passengers and moved her basket back. Another woman touched the hide, asking where he got it. When he said the mountain, she stared. She gasped that he killed a boar. Rhett tapped the hide, noting that was how they became available. Clyde coughed into his sleeve as the red cloth slipped into view. Then the blue, then the green. The women who once mocked his poverty stared intently. For once, their mouths did useful work. They stayed shut as they reached Cedar Hollow. At the entrance, Martha was already crying for an audience. Clyde tied his ox up. He moved the other passengers back. Martha had planted herself firmly in the cold snow. Clasping both hands to her chest, her dramatic voice grew louder with every new arrival. She gained fresh strength. What an act. She gathered half the village around. She put her show on for Earl Blevins, the chief who witnessed his family split. He was also the man still holding Rhett's funeral loan record. Martha saw the boar hide and turned her sobbing up another level, screaming that he had arrived. She wailed that her ungrateful son had money for 3 shameless women, but left his mother to starve. This human meat detector had upgraded to public theater. Same greedy appetite, just a bigger audience. Rhett stepped down from the cart. He asked Earl to let everyone judge as Martha rushed toward the goods. Rhett stepped right between her and the cart, confronting her directly. He asked who worked her fields for 20 years. Martha's mouth tightened instantly. He asked who got the houses, land, animals, and tools. Her favored sons were absent, but their shares were not. Pointing at Earl, Rhett spoke up. Ask why he still owed $1,000 after his wife's funeral, he challenged. An older woman shouted first, because Martha refused to give him grain or money. Another added that they saw him selling blood. Martha swung around in fury. She claimed it was family business, but he reminded her she brought it here. Earl folded his arms. He witnessed the Winslow household's separate right after the funeral. Rhett received only his farmhouse and his debts, while Martha kept everything else. She split everything with her sons. Villagers nodded as Martha looked around in defeat. No one would support her. The loud shouting quickly reached the farmhouse. Hazel, Lorna, and Millie walked down the lane, stopping beside the cart. Martha saw her audience dissolving. Her crowd was slipping away. Her schemes had failed. The man who comforted her steps back as Martha points her finger. She targets the widows, screaming that he lives with 3 young women. Call them helpers if you want, she sneers. Everyone knows what happens inside. Millie, Hazel, and Lorna helped Rhett's wife, while Martha hid away counting grain. Now Martha wants to shame them, but Rhett faces the crowd instead. Hazel carried water during his wife's illness, and Lorna washed her clothes. Millie stayed for the burial after family fled, making several villagers nod along. Shelter and protection. Martha wants them abandoned because helpless targets are easier. To shame, Martha snaps back. Let their own families feed them then. Earl looks right at her, asking if she will take them in instead. Will she feed all 3 through the winter? Martha freezes instantly. The crowd waits as Earl demands a simple yes or no. Martha looks at Rhett's cart, asking why she should feed husband killers. Her fake concern vanishes the second she has to pay. Laughter erupts. Earl nods. The 3 women will remain with Rhett as registered helpers. That ends the argument. Hazel tightly squeezes Millie's trembling hand. Lorna lifts her chin high. They stand together, refusing to hide anymore. They do not look ready to run. Martha struggles for words, speechless. The crowd laughs again. Rhett pulls $10 bills out and hands them to Earl. This clears the funeral debt. Earl counts the cash, looking at him differently. Paid in full. Martha glares at the money, absolutely burning with resentment. Earl pockets the book, mentioning the county is relaxing some trading rules. A skilled hunter who pays his debts needs to stay ready, Earl notes. Rhett intends to do exactly that. Martha glares one last time, completely ignored. She leaves alone. Once the crowd disperses, the 3 women step up. They help him carry everything home. Rhett explains their safety is now official. Millie touches the green cloth, asking if this means nobody can evict them. Anyone who tries has to get through all of us first, Rhett promises her. If anyone grabs you, the others hit back while you scream for help. Millie raises a broom, declaring she can absolutely fight and scream. Lorna eyes her tiny stance with mock fear. Millie swings at her ankles. Lorna dodges. Rhett nods in approval. She is officially promoted to ankle guard. She looks proud enough to guard a fortress. Then he opens the sacks. Rations cover the table. There is fresh cotton, soap, and heaps of sugar. The massive beast hide covers the floor, perfect for a thick winter blanket. Hazel measures it out, while Lorna votes to turn it into a mattress. Millie wants one giant blanket for all 3. Rhett laughs, agreeing to it. He says the stubborn beast can finally do some good for his family. The 3 women freeze. Hazel gently reaches out to touch the blue fabric. She immediately checks if the other girls got something just as nice. Millie holds up the green, murmuring that it might be too bright. Lorna ignores the hesitation, grabbing the vibrant red fabric for herself. She asks how it looks, and Rhett admits the red looks dangerous on her. Lorna smiles, pleased with the reply. Hazel watches them, holding her blue cloth. Lorna jokes that Rhett practiced his lines, and he quickly defends himself. Stared at by the local married women, Rhett felt the pressure. Millie laughed into the green fabric. Then Hazel brought out a wrapped bundle. While he was gone, they had used rabbit fur and spare yarn. Inside was a pair of fur-lined gloves and a thick scarf. Lorna pushed the gloves into his hands. Your fingers came back cold yesterday. Millie wrapped the scarf around his neck twice. Now you have no excuse. Hazel tightened the knot, and the coat stays with you next time. Nobody had ever made him clothing before. He took a breath to feel it. Then Lorna tugged the scarf until he bent toward her. Too tight, he told Lorna. You are enjoying this. Lorna smiled quite a bit. The 3 of them smiled. His household had gained food, legal cover, and a coordinated bullying department. After they slept, he entered the hidden homestead. He planted the seeds in neat rows. Chicks already moved with more strength. Ducklings chased each other. Round their pen, his breeding rabbits had emptied their feed tray and looked ready to start a dynasty. He processed 5 wolf hides and stacked the Winter pelts beside the boarhide's empty space. The bow had fed them, but the wolf. Fight had cost 5 arrows. Bigger game and longer hunts would only get harder. He needed a hunter booklet and a legal gun. Next morning, he went to ask Earl for a recommendation. A licensed hunter from neighboring Blackpine Hollow was already in his yard, claiming Cedar Hollow's mountain for himself. The next morning, Earl's yard was crowded around Vern Dillard's rifle. Vern was Blackpine Hollow's licensed hunter. He had come to explain why Cedar Hollow's mountain apparently belonged to him. He rested the rifle across one shoulder and looked over their villagers. No licensed hunter lives here, meaning your people have no business chasing game on the north slope. One farmer argued that Cedar Hollow families had gathered firewood there for generations. Another reminded Vern that their traps had fed both villages during a bad winter. Vern smiled. Gather sticks, leave the animals to men who can shoot. There it was, one rifle, one license, and enough confidence to annex a mountain before breakfast. Earl saw him enter. Rhett came to ask for an exam recommendation. Vern looked at his patched clothes. For him, no, for me, Rhett answered. Vern laughed. Several men from Blackpine Hollow joined him. He let them finish. Classic arrogant move. Arrogant people build better stages when nobody interrupts. Then Vern tapped the rifle. Stock, a recommendation wastes paper. If Cedar Hollow had a hunter, he would prove it. Rhett told Vern to name the proof. Vern pointed at some sparrows feeding near the field wall. 5 shots each, most birds wins. I use my rifle. You use whatever little toy you trust. Rhett answered. If he wins, Blackpine Hollow drops its claim to their north slope. Vern's smile widened. And when you lose, Cedar Hollow stays out of my hunting ground. Earl looked at Rhett. The wager was informal, but every witness would remember who backed down. Vern had tied his mountain claim to his shooting reputation. Half the Cedar Hollow crowd shook their heads and muttered for him to refuse. 4 rifle hits sounded unbeatable. The other half leaned toward the fence and started taking sides. Rhett nodded. Shoot first. Vern smiled wider, loaded 5 rounds and stepped 2. The fence. His first shot dropped a sparrow from the ground. The flock burst upward. His second shot hit another. The third missed. Vern adjusted, fired twice. He dropped 2 more birds from the flying flock. That made 4 hits from 5 rifle shots. Blackpine cheered. Cedar Hollow went dead silent. 4 moving birds was serious shooting. Vern knew it. A Cedar Hollow villager muttered that they had already lost the slope. But a woman nearby told him to shut up until the young farmer took his shot. Smart woman, but terrible odds. Vern cracked open his rifle, blowing smoke from the barrel. Your turn, farm boy, he mocked. The young man reached into his coat for a homemade slingshot. Everyone burst out laughing. The frame was simple ashwood, cut years back and worn smooth. He had trusted this weapon on birds long before he ever held a fine gun. Vern stared, asking if he was hunting or remembering childhood. He told him to keep counting. He quietly pulled 5 round stones from his pocket, holding them ready between his fingers. The surviving sparrows circled over the field. He let fly his first stone. 1 bird fell. The flock turned. His second stone caught the leader. His third shot took the bird right behind it. The fourth folded near the wall. 1 final sparrow tried to climb above the trees, but his last stone reached it first. That is absolute madness. 5 stones, 5 sparrows, and the whole yard froze. Vern stared at the fallen birds, then checked his slingshot as if it had cheated. A Cedar Hollow boy finally yelled out 5, and that suddenly broke the silence. Their villagers erupted in absolute joy. Men slapped the fence. 2 women started arguing. They bickered over who had predicted his victory, even though neither of them actually had. The guy who rode off the slope started bragging that he always believed in him. Earl laughed hysterically, bending double. Vern stood frozen, his face completely pale. He had brought a rifle to humiliate an unlicensed country boy. Instead, he answered with a toy. Vern was cooked, and everyone had counted the stones. The young farmer held out his hand for the north slope, but Vern ignored it. A toy trick does not make you a hunter, Vern spat. He replied, 4 birds say otherwise. The crowd made sure he heard that. Vern quietly picked up his rifle to leave. He warned that Blackpine Hollow would stay off the slope until his official hunter exam. Fail it and they would return. Vern stormed off before anyone could cheer again. Earl wiped his eyes, promising to sign the recommendation. The young man asked if he had doubts. Earl grinned. He had paperwork before, but now he had pure entertainment. That evening, Irene Blevins arrived at their farmhouse, carrying a fresh basket of eggs. As Earl's wife, she had already shared the incredible news with Hazel, Lorna, and Millie. They knew before he even walked through the gate. 5 birds with a slingshot, Irene announced. Vern looked ready to arrest those stones, Lorna noted, turning to him with a smile. She teased that he forgot to mention being lethal with a simple wooden stick. He claimed he just got lucky, but Hazel quickly pointed a finger at him. Millie gently took his right hand, examining his fingers. 5 times, he insisted. He joked that luck can be persistent. She pressed her thumb against his thick callus. This skin does not feel lucky, she said. Lorna leaned in close. She warned Millie that inspecting him so closely might start costing her. He laughed, saying he would only charge eggs. Hazel crossed her arms in annoyance. She claimed his fake modesty was worse than boasting. He teased that he wanted maximum impact. Lorna grabbed his other hand, asking him to show her exactly how he held the weapon. She guided her fingers over the frame, deliberately leaning much closer than needed. Hazel loudly cleared her throat, pointing out the slingshot was in his hand, not hers. Right then, 3 women lean over Rhett's hands all at once, even after beating a skilled rifleman in public. He still somehow lost control of the room before dinner. Irene just watches them. Smiling far too knowingly, Earl says the exam is tomorrow, and Hazel's grip instantly tightens. Hazel asks if they use real rifles. Irene nods. Lorna looks down. Lorna warns him not to embarrass the entire district, saving some work. Millie places 2 eggs for luck. Hazel slides a 3rd right beside them. Hazel jokes that he needs a lot. Millie studies him, asking if he feared missing. Rhett answers that missing worried him far less than explaining a loss to them. Lorna nods, calling it the correct answer, admitting they would have been absolutely unbearable. Rhett says they already are. Hazel smiles, noting that he still keeps coming back. After Irene leaves, the 3 women carry the basket away, shutting the door. Their voices stay low. He hears his name twice, then Lorna laughs and they start arguing. Whatever they settle in that private council remains entirely their own secret. But back then, Rhett only knew one thing for certain. Nobody sounded even slightly afraid. Clyde's cart carries him toward the district militia compound. Rhett tries to pay, but Clyde pushes his hand away. No charge. He calls the ride an investment. Clyde refuses the fare, completely ignoring Rhett's hand. That is the first bit of local respect to save him money, a beautiful development. The range sits behind a long fence and several storage buildings. Applicants crowd around the firing line, each holding a recommendation slip. Captain Tobias Donnelly runs the entire hunter exam. He has a quiet, commanding voice that instantly makes loud men lower theirs. Tobias takes the paper, looks at Rhett's name, and then studies his face for a moment. He stares. Rhett notices, but the captain gives nothing away. Before Rhett can even speak, another applicant steps in. He is the top trainee from Blackburn, having heard about the slingshot defeat. Desperate to challenge Rhett in front of the range, the young hothead steps forward. Dressing Rhett, he sneers that his uncle called the slingshot victory nothing but luck. Rhett simply notes how fast that rumor travels here. Mac has practiced with militia weapons, surrounded by a noisy crowd. He sneers openly at Rhett's patched and worn-out coat. Tobias suddenly cuts him off, 5 rounds at 50 meters, center score deciding things. As a scorer places a fresh target downrange, Mac leans in quite close. He speaks loud enough for everyone to hear, telling Rhett to keep his shots on the paper. Tobias sends Mac to the line first. Mac shoots a remarkably tight group. His friends applaud loudly, acting as if his hunter booklet has already been printed. Mac proudly lays his target on the bench, boasting that this is what training looks like. Rhett calmly inspects the heavy rifle's action and iron sights. His hands instantly remember thousands of rounds from a past life nobody else has lived. Tobias watches this careful inspection, his neutral expression shifting by just half an inch. Rhett raises the rifle and fires. The first bullet punches the center, but Mac just scoffs. Calling it beginner's luck, he laughs when no second hole appears. Mac mocks the miss, but the scorer raises his binoculars. Something is definitely up. Still only one hole visible. Mac instantly freezes. The 4th and 5th bullets follow the exact same path, once the range clears. The scorer returned. A single ragged hole sat dead center. He checked the paper from both sides. Tobias pressed his finger to the edge. 5 rounds, Tobias confirmed. Just one opening. The scorer held up the paper. His hands were steady during gunfire, but now, the paper shook as Mac pointed. The sights were set for him. Tobias simply turned the weapon in his hands. Mac tried again. He insisted they saw the rifle leave the rack before it tore. 5 bullets tore it, Tobias replied. The other applicants drifted much closer, leaving. Mac behind, they quietly edged toward the new target, moving Max off the bench. His tight shooting group had looked incredibly impressive for barely 3 minutes. Now those very friends crowded around his target instead. Max stared at the paper, muttering that it was impossible. He cleared his rifle, noting they told him to keep them on the paper. A soldier behind Tobias turned to hide a laugh. 2 applicants who had mocked his coat moved aside as he stepped past. Max's friends stopped smiling. Tobias looked at him again, asking where he learned weapon handling. Just long practice, he replied. Tobias narrowed his eyes. Military, he shook his head. Mountains, that was true, but left out 50 years of practice nobody there could know about. Tobias kept studying him while he kept giving the instructor absolutely nothing useful. After shooting, Tobias led the remaining applicants into the wet hills behind the compound. 3 cloth markers were hidden on separate routes. They had 1 hour to find all 3 in return. Max sprinted the moment Tobias released them. Most followed, but he stood still. Rain had softened the ground. Militia boots left the main trail beside a crushed fern. He followed those heel marks, finding the first cloth under a fallen log. The second route crossed bare stone, where one rock had moss scraped from its edge, and the next ledge hid the marker too, a wet streak on dry cedar bark gave away the third. He pulled it from the root and returned in 15 minutes, finding 2 scorers still arranging water for the candidates they expected much later. One nearly dropped his bucket when he held out all 3 cloths. Tobias checked the markers and clock, while a scorer muttered he was heart dog. Better diet, he replied, making Tobias nearly smile. Mac returned nearly 50 minutes after the start, carrying 2 cloths and enough mud to prove he had searched the entire hill completely wrong. One friend asked where the third marker was, but Mac looked at him instead of answering, seeing all 3 in his hand. His jaw locked as his deep embarrassment turned incredibly ugly. Only 7 applicants remained after those tests, and Tobias announced the final test would run overnight in the deep timber. Each candidate would carry 1 knife and 1 rescue flare. Fire the flare, and they failed. Mac followed him toward the mountain in absolute silence, which worried him far more than his mouth ever had. That afternoon, the final 7 candidates entered the deep timber. The survival test gave each of them 1 knife, a rescue flare, and 1 simple rule: stay alive until 6 in the morning. Fire the flare, and they failed. Mac had lost with the rifle and on the tracking hill, yet followed him into the trees without speaking. Trouble was expected. His assigned campsite sat inside a rocky bowl with 1 exit. Mac passed above with 2 friends. A rocky hollow with only 1 easy exit. Mac rides past up above with 2 friends. He studied the bottleneck, then kept walking. Bad place for running, good spot for controlling a fire. By dark he had a lean-to, dry wood, and 2 fish roasting over the coals. 1 applicant stared at the food like he had opened a restaurant. First night outside, he asked, but the guy just kept walking. He spent 50 years guiding rich hunters who forgot socks. Shelter was easy. After dark, footsteps stopped outside the light. 2 sets, they waited behind the brush, close enough for him to hear 1 man breathing through his mouth. He kept turning the fish as if he had noticed nothing. A minute later, the footsteps moved around his camp. 1 man crossed the narrow exit, the other circled near the rock wall, then both slipped away uphill. He waited until the forest settled. The air smelled wrong blood. He walked the edge of the fire light and found dark splashes across the snow. Rabbit blood had been spread around his shelter and through the narrow exit. The message was simple: predators would follow the scent into a boxed-in camp. Wolves could surround the shelter. A boar could charge through the only exit. Whoever planted it wanted teeth to do the killing. Talk about a brutal plan. He could smell fresh movement in the lower brush, and whatever followed the blood was getting closer. Mac had spent the afternoon watching him. Mac's friends had vanished from their own fires before those footsteps arrived. He treated that as a working theory and followed the tracks. His spring-enhanced hearing made their whispers easy to trail. He stayed far enough back that their fire light never touched him. They moved north and crossed a frozen creek. One of the men stopped on the far bank and looked back. He dropped behind a dead pine while snow slid from the branches onto his shoulders. The man listened for several seconds, heard only the creek, and kept walking. They entered a shallow cave beneath a granite shelf. Mac waited inside with 2 men from the exam. Their fire showed him the cave mouth, the tree above it, and the narrow trail connecting them to his bowl. He heard one of the men whisper that the smell should bring something before midnight. That confirmed everything. He backed away before they saw him. Now watch what he does. Give Mac time to deny everything. Cleaning the blood would leave him free. To try again, so he improved his plan, dragging a blood-soaked branch from his camp toward the cave. At every turn, he refreshed the scent until the line leading to Mac was stronger than the trail around his shelter. Then he sharpened stakes and set them behind the brush at his own entrance. Anything that ignored the new trail would still meet an ugly welcome. By midnight, the mountain went quiet. Then the brush below his camp started breaking. One wild boar pushed through first, 2 more followed. All 3 had their noses down. They smelled the rabbit blood and came straight toward the fire. A boar can ignore pain when it charges. It hates flame before the charge begins. He pulled 2 burning branches from the fire and stepped into the exit. The light boar lifted its head. He threw 1 branch to its left. Sparks burst across the snow. The lead boar veered right directly onto the stronger blood trail. Its partner followed. The third ignored the first flame and charged him. He waited until its head dropped, slammed the burning branch into the snow across its path and jumped behind the rock wall. Heat and sparks hit its face. It swerved, dragging it hard enough to tear a groove through the brush. Rhett swung the other branch low and drove it behind the pair. 3 wild boars thundered uphill toward Mac's cave. Rhett followed through the trees. A scream echoed. He hadn't even reached the granite shelf. Mac burst from the cave with the boars right behind him. Then he climbed the nearest tree faster than he had ever moved during tracking. One of his friends scrambled onto a rock ledge. The other wedged himself between 2 roots and started begging every saint he remembered. The wild boars tore straight through their camp. Blankets, food, and firewood went flying everywhere. Mac clung to a branch, while the largest boar rammed the trunk below him. His trousers quickly darkened. One pitiful line. No dignity deserved here. Suddenly, a friend yelled for Mac to use his flare. He hesitated. The rules held him tighter than the tree. Fire the flare, his friend yelled. The survival booklet disappeared. The boar hit the trunk. Mac fired. Red light climbed above the mountain. Beautiful, quite a cell phone. His trap was now an official failure signal everyone could see. Militia whistles answered from the distant ridge. The rescue team would reach him soon. Rhett slipped back to his camp. Before anyone found him near the cave, the blood trail had shifted. His stake still guarded the entrance. The fire remained alive. His test was now effectively over, so he entered the hidden homestead. The rescue team later reported that Mac stayed up in that tree while they fought through the timber. Rhett washed, ate a second dinner, and slept in a modern bed. While Mac clung to a tree, Rhett enjoyed a warm bed in a second dinner. Rhett enjoyed that contrast. At 5:45, he returned to the rocky bowl through the homestead mirror. The fire was low, and no predator had crossed the stakes. Rhett scattered the coals, packed his knife, and then walked toward the checkpoint as the sky turned gray. At 6:10 the next morning, after the survival clock ended, Rhett reached the militia checkpoint first. 4 other applicants arrived during the reporting window. 5 of them had passed. Captain Tobias looked at his clean coat and rested face, asking how the night was. Rhett told Tobias he had slept well. The captain's left eye twitched. A soldier behind him looked toward the mountain, muttering that they heard screaming for 2 hours. Rhett replied that some camps were just louder than his. Tobias stared at his clean coat for another second. The test only rewarded results, so Tobias moved on. The rescue party arrived after sunrise. Mac came down on a stretcher with torn clothes, bruised pride, and a foul smell. Nobody discussed politely. His 2 friends walked behind him, and both avoided Rhett's eyes. The Nepo hunter saw him standing beside the pass marker and sat upright. He did this, Mac shouted, claiming Rhett sent those wild boars to his cave. Tobias turned toward Rhett, asking if he did it. Rhett insisted he spent the night at his assigned camp. Mac pointed with a shaking hand, claiming Rhett moved the blood trail. Rhett calmly asked him what blood trail. Mac's mouth fell open. Complete silence. The checkpoint went dead quiet for a very good reason. To explain Rhett's supposed crime, Mac had to explain the rabbit blood around Rhett's shelter. He also had to explain why his men knew it was there. Rhett faced Mac's 2 friends, telling them to explain to Captain Tobias what they were carrying. The first man stepped back, looking at Mac for help. Mac stared through him. The second folded, admitting they carried rabbit blood on Mac's orders. Spread it, claiming wild beasts would make it look like an accident. Mac twisted on the stretcher, screaming to shut up. Too late. The murder. The plan had finally found a witness with weak knees, and Tobias's face hardened. You used predator bait inside another applicant's camp, as Mac tried to sit taller. It was only a prank, but a prank with boars, he asked. Bold defense, one soldier. Laughed once, then stopped when Tobias looked over since Mac had already failed. The moment he fired the flare, his own man made sure everyone understood why. Tobias ordered the stretcher moved aside and called the 5 passing applicants forward. He handed each of them a hunter booklet. His had a red cover, his name and the district seal. The scorer who had watched his single-hole target passed it over with both hands. Yesterday he had called him a farmer, but today he used his name. The little booklet changed what he could do, giving him legal hunting status and making him eligible for a registered hunting gun. Once a weapon was issued, every shell would be logged with 50 allowed each month, no wasted shots. Fair enough. Tobias held his booklet a moment longer, saying, "You are the first licensed hunter from Cedar Hollow." Several soldiers applauded, and the score from the shooting test looked at his hands again. 2 applicants who had laughed at his patched coat shifted aside, making room for him at the pass marker. Behind them, Mac's friends stopped calling him the favorite, and one looked at the red booklet in his hand and then at Mac's stretcher. Then Tobias lowered his voice, warning that Mac Dillard holds grudges. He told Tobias he holds trees. Tobias almost smiled. He told Tobias he was serious. Tobias replied, "So am I, I'll watch him." Mac heard them. The hatred on his face stayed sharp, but he had no accusation left that did not expose himself. The test was over, but his grudge definitely not over. Sunset, Clyde's cart brought him home to Hazel, waiting beneath the cedar tree. She had his coat wrapped around her. Snow had packed around her boots, and both hands were red from the cold. The moment she saw him, she ran. The cart was still moving when she caught the side rail and forced Clyde to stop. Hazel grabbed his shoulders, checked his face, then pulled open his coat to search for blood. He said he was fine. Hazel kept both hands on his coat, and he reminded her she was gone all night. That was the exam, she countered. Her fingers tightened, whispering she had a nightmare. The fear in her voice made him stop joking, and Hazel pressed both arms around him in front of Clyde and the cart with 3 villagers walking home. He held her until her grip loosened. Clyde cleared his throat, asking if he should circle the village or if they were finished. Hazel stepped back, turning bright red as he showed her the hunter booklet. She touched the red cover, seeing he passed, then hugged him again. Clyde shook his head, calling him the first hunter in Cedar Hollow captured at the entrance. He told Clyde wolves gave him more room, making Hazel look up, telling him to go hug one. He told Clyde to see how dangerous she was. Lorna and Millie ran from the farmhouse before Clyde stopped laughing. Millie took the booklet with both hands as Lorna checked his sleeves for injuries, finding none. Lorna asked if he got lucky again, and he told Lorna that 3 boars helped. All 3 women stared as he gave them the clean version. Bad men used blood. The boars followed it back, and the flare ended Mac's exam. Millie looked horrified while Hazel gripped his arm, and Lorna's expression turned cold enough to sharpen tools. Then Millie hugged his waist as Lorna joined from one side and Hazel took the other. He had survived wolves and boars, but the widows remained the most committed threat to his breathing. That night they celebrated Cedar Hollow's first hunter booklet with eggs, rabbit, and the last piece of candy in the house. Millie insisted that treat belonged to Rhett. Since he had passed, he broke it into 4, making Lorna complain he was ruining a perfectly good reward. Hazel kept the booklet beside her bowl and checked it every few minutes as if the district might change its mind. "Still real, Rhett?" asked. Hazel slid it back toward him, then keep coming home to use it. The booklet had barely reached Millie's hands again when their repaired gate shook. Under a heavy blow, before they could finish, their piece was shattered. Brock arrived with 6 men. The local bully carried a paper claiming Millie belonged to him. That afternoon in their farmhouse yard, Millie held the last piece of candy to Rhett's mouth. Then Brock Fenley kicked their repaired gate off its hinge. The board buried itself in the snow beside their table. Millie's smile disappeared. Brock was Cedar Hollow's loudest bully and the head accountant's spoiled son. He brought 6 men, a fake marriage paper, and absolute confidence. He never paid for his damage. Millie's hand stopped beside Rhett's mouth. The candy dropped into his palm. Behind Brock came Edna Vick, Millie's former mother-in-law. She had starved Millie, stolen her jewelry, and beaten her for fighting off her brother-in-law before throwing her into freezing winter without a coat. Now Edna pointed at Millie like she found missing livestock, shouting, "There she is." Edna snapped that Brock paid $200. Brock waved the signed paper over his head, demanding she leave with him. Hazel stepped in front of Millie. Lorna held her rabbit knife low beside her leg. Millie stood behind them, shaking The bride snatcher looked Millie over and smiled, calling her a pretty little thing. Worth the trouble. Millie's face went white. Rhett stood up. Read the room, Brock. Brock glanced at Rhett's hunter booklet beside the bowls. A red booklet does not make this his business. Rhett countered that it became his business when Brock broke his gate. Edna pushed past Hazel, grabbing for Millie, screaming she had fed this curse for years so she could marry her off anywhere. You threw her out, Rhett snapped. You cannot sell her. Brock slapped the paper against Rhett's chest, boasting that it said he could. He took the page, read the two crooked signatures, and tore it right down the middle, declaring it only proved he paid for a woman who never agreed. Rhett dropped the halves at Brock's boots, calling it trafficking with terrible handwriting. His 6 men spread across the yard. 2 carried clubs, while the others relied on the confidence that comes from standing behind 5 of their equally stupid friends. Hazel pulled Millie toward the kitchen wall, while Lorna shifted her grip on the knife. Rhett stepped far enough from the table so nobody could use the women as cover. Edna's face twisted as she raised her hand, but Rhett caught Edna's wrist before the slap moved an inch. Millie flinched anyway, her body still. Remembering that hand, he forced Edna's arm down, shoving her behind Brock. Try again, and she would not leave with the same working hands she brought. Brock stepped close enough to breathe candy fumes at Rhett, asking if one village trick makes him dangerous. Rhett glanced at the 6 men, muttering that their faces did. Brock's mouth tightened. He had one chance to leave with his pride bruised, but naturally he chose the expensive option, ordering his men to break him and take Millie. The first thug swung a wooden club at Rhett's head, but he stepped inside the arc, driving his. He slammed his shoulder into his chest, sending him crashing into the broken gate. The board beneath him split again. His repair fund was becoming a real business. The second grabbed his coat from behind. He caught his wrist, spun, and threw him right across the table. Plates jumped. Hazel pulled Millie clear before the hot broth spilled. A third thug threw a fist at his ribs. He caught his forearm against his, struck his elbow, and drove a knee straight into his stomach. He folded before his friends could reach him. 2 more rushed together. He kicked one knee sideways and punched the other right under the ribs. One collapsed, while the other hit the snow and stayed there, reconsidering his job. The 6th thug grabbed his sleeve. Lorna slammed the flat of her kitchen knife against his knuckles. He let go with a sharp yelp and backed away 3 steps. He looked over, and Lorna simply raised an eyebrow. Household helper, fair point. Brock shoved the last man forward, shouting there were 6 of them, but the thug muttered back that 5 of their own were already down. Do math under pressure. Brock cursed and charged the man himself, who simply let him throw the first punch. It grazed his cheek. Then his fist met Brock's nose. Brock dropped to both knees with his hands over his bleeding face. The last standing thug backed straight through the gate without waiting for permission. The entire fight took less than a minute. Edna had clearly counted on fear doing half the work. Hazel still held Millie protectively behind her, while Lorna stood in front, her knife ready. None of these brave women had run. Soon, neighbors filled the lane outside the gate. Nobody had shown up in time to help, but they certainly arrived in time to watch Brock's reputation leave on several different shoulders. 6 men had marched into his yard to collect one frightened woman, but they left carrying each other. Edna screamed at him from behind them, warning that Luther would destroy him. She pointed at Brock, who still owed her money. Brock looked up through watering eyes, asking for what. Our guy kicked the loose skateboard. It fell beside him. $100. Brock yelled about his broken nose. The man answered that Brock broke his gate first. Brock stared as he held out his hand. You had 200 to buy a woman, so find 100 for lumber. Brock reached inside his coat with shaking fingers and slapped the money into his palm. He counted it slowly right in front of him, making him wait while he checked every single bill. He noted that the gate repair fund was finally profitable. A neighbor laughed from the lane. Another asked if the next repair came with a receipt. Brock heard both and went bright red above his broken nose. His thugs had stopped looking to him for orders, staring instead toward the road. Brock still had 6 followers on paper, but in this yard he had absolutely none. Talk about getting humbled. He staggered toward his surviving thugs. He called out that the next visit would cost more. Brock turned, saw him still holding his money, and left without another speech. That was his first sensible decision. The yard went completely quiet after they left. Millie stared at the torn paper in the snow. When her knees suddenly gave out, he caught her before she hit the cold ground. Hazel took one arm, Lorna took the other, and Millie clutched his coat, whispering that they came because of her. He told Millie they came because Brock thinks women are property. Millie tightened her grip, saying he would bring his father. He brushed the snow from her sleeve, replying that his father could learn the gate price too. Millie shook her head. Luther controls the cooperative accounts, and people easily disappear from work lists when he gets angry. He smiled warmly, placing both of his hands around hers. He tells Millie she is his person, and protecting her is his choice. Her eyes fill. If Brock brings his father, he will fight him, Rhett continues, and if he brings the county, he fights the county. If a king comes for her, that king gets. In line, Millie presses her forehead against his chest and holds on, whispering that she believed. Then when they called her cursed, truly believing she was bad luck, every house got worse. Rhett lifts her face, saying Brock entered his yard with 6 men, and his life got worse. Because he is an idiot, she does not get credit for his foolishness, drawing a broken laugh. From her, she holds him tighter as Hazel looks toward the road, and Lorna closes the remaining half of the gate, wedging it upright. 10 minutes after the gang fled, Rhett carries the torn paper to Earl Blevins' house. Earl, their village chief, reads it once and tosses both pieces into the stove. Brock's father is Luther Fenley, and Earl reminds Rhett that he controls the cooperative accounts. His cousin Royce Kavanagh is a deputy at the County Public Safety Bureau. Royce is why complaints against the Fenleys vanished. Luther controlled work and food while Royce sent bruised complainants home quiet. Earl rubbed his jaw, advising local channels to warn them. Rhett tells Earl he won't use them. Earl watches him, asking if he is thinking of Captain Tobias. Rhett replies he wants someone Royce cannot order around. Earl leans back, warning that a simple beating won't end them. Rhett knows and intends to go after the weakness behind them. Before Earl can finish warning him, Luther Fenley arrives at the gate. Luther was Brock's father, the cooperative accountant who made poverty feel personal. Brock follows behind him, cloth pressed under his nose. Luther walks into Earl's yard without greeting them, declaring that Rhett assaulted his son. Rhett replies that his son tried to abduct Millie. Luther points at him, demanding an apology, $200 back, and the girl. Rhett holds up the $100 Brock paid, calling it gate money. Brock makes a furious sound through his cloth as Luther's eyes narrow, asking if a hunter booklet can protect him from the county. Earl answers before Rhett can. He says the district issues Rhett a gun tomorrow. Luther looks at Earl, who continues in a dry voice that Rhett placed 5 shots through one hole at 50 meters. Captain Tobias signed the result. Luther's gaze moves from Rhett's hands to his own chest. His pointing hand drops and he turns to slap Brock across the head, snapping that he brought 6 men and still lost. Brock stumbles, but Luther cuts him off, telling him to shut up before dragging his son toward the road. At the gate, he warns Rhett that this is not finished. Rhett knows, and he is not backing down. Luther leaves without demanding Millie again. Earl watches him go, noting he scared him. Rhett says he just let his imagination work. Earl warns him that his imagination has Royce behind it, as Rhett grabs his coat, replying his needs Tobias. The next morning, Rhett heads to the district militia warehouse for his gun. Captain Tobias Donnelly checks his hunter booklet, then opens a long wooden case. Inside lies a new double-barrel shotgun, oiled and clean. Before handing it over, Tobias studies his face again, asking for his father's name. This question hits an old bruise, and Rhett replies he does not know. Tobias keeps his hand on the case. He tells Tobias that he never knew his father. Martha simply found him abandoned as a baby. She raised him for work, and nobody ever gave him his birth father's name. Tobias froze at the latch. He stared closely at the young man's eyes and jaw. Then he checked the age in his booklet. He waited, but Tobias asked nothing more. That quiet stare left him wondering, why did this man care about a father he never knew? He left it alone while Brock's family was currently circling his home. Tobias lifted the shotgun. Before he finished explaining the break action, the young man opened it. He checked both chambers, snapped it shut, and mounted the weapon toward the empty sander in one smooth, practiced motion. Tobias looked at him with suddenly sharpened eyes. Tobias noted he handled it like a veteran. The young man simply claimed he learned fast. Apparently, Tobias only issued 50 shells a month, a limit everyone had to log. Keeping the weapon empty inside, Tobias asked if this was from long practice. Longer than he looked, he replied. Tobias studied him again, but Brock's threat was too urgent. His missing history could wait. The shotgun felt heavy and solid in his grip. The hunter booklet made him legal, but the gun itself made that status undeniable. Bringing it home that afternoon, Millie stared at the weapon from 3 feet away, asking to touch it. He assured Millie it was unloaded and kept it pointed safely at the floor. Millie placed a careful hand on the wooden stock, trying to lift its heavy weight. It pulled her shoulder forward, so he stepped in to steady the barrels safely. Millie asked if this was right. He told her to keep her hands firm. As Millie adjusted, her back brushed against his chest for a brief second, making her freeze. She completely forgot her next question. To be fair, so did he, until Lorna cleared her throat. Lorna teased that the lesson seemed thorough, while Hazel quickly snatched the shell box from him. It gets less thorough without ammunition, but Lorna immediately demanded the next turn. Hazel asked where he planned to store the shells. Meanwhile, Millie refused to let go of the stock until she could lower it on her own. Within 10 seconds, 3 determined women had established more safety rules than the entire district militia. He accepted them all. He certainly enjoyed living. With the empty shotgun slung over his shoulder, he headed back. He returned to Tobias before sunset, quietly closing the heavy warehouse door behind him. Brock was just a small piece of the puzzle. He wanted the entire Fenley Kavanagh. Corrupt network brought down. With the new shotgun in hand, he told Tobias his exact plans. He knew exactly where to dig, right beneath Luther Fenley's dirty pig trough. In his first life, investigators had found a secret bribery ledger there 10 years later. He was 10 years early now, meaning the trough could still be completely empty. Brock's fake marriage raid proved that local complaints always died under Deputy Royce Kavanagh. The corrupt deputy protecting the Fenleys, the broken gate, and Millie's sheer terror were still fresh in his mind. Captain Tobias Donnelly quietly locked the warehouse door. What would the book even prove? Who Luther robbed, who he paid, and who buried the complaints? Luther's public book always stayed clean enough to pass any official inspection. But the hidden book existed because these corrupt men needed insurance against one another. Just one real page could make the entire protection chain panic. Tobias held his gaze. If he brought that ledger, Tobias could root it far above Pine Glass County. But get caught without it, and Royce would label him a burglar, while Luther sent more thugs. Tobias glanced at the shotgun. They would take the weapon first and use the burglary charge to make Brock's raid look lawful. In this town, everyone already knew their lines. He does not smile. Tobias asks how certain he is about the hidden trough. He is certain enough to dig, but uncertain enough to scout first. Tobias tells him to bring the book straight back, but if the spot is wrong, he must leave the dirt untouched. Entering Luther's yard is his job alone. On the ride home, he asks Clyde Hatcher about Luther's habits, since Clyde is the oxcart driver and local village rumor expert. As they pass the Best Creek field, Clyde points out the winter stubble covering the rich soil. Beyond a ditch stands a leaning, decaying wooden shed nearby. Clyde explains that Cecil Moreland owned it until Luther fabricated a $2,000 fee to seize the land, leaving Cecil's mother to freeze in that shed. She died the next winter. When Cecil protested, Royce's men beat him into silence. Luther planted his own crops before the grave soil settled. The protagonist's hands tighten around the wooden rail as Clyde continues talking. Clyde notes that Luther's salary never matched his fancy furniture or gambling. He even sends expensive gifts to Royce, gambling weekly with his son. His wife Gloria Fenley stays home, though Clyde claims she dresses better. On those gambling nights, he gets a sideways look and takes the hint. Talk about a shady family. Back home that evening, he tells Hazel, Lorna, and Millie only the essentials. He is going to watch the Fenley house tonight. The less they know, the safer they will be if questioned. Hazel folds her arms, demanding to know if they should sleep, while he creeps around a corrupt yard. He shakes his head, wanting them to be able to answer honestly. Lorna glances at the shotgun, noting it sounds like a dangerous version of honesty. Millie touches his sleeve, asking if this is all because of her. Reassuring her, he says no, Brock just used her as an excuse. Luther built this conflict long before seeing their gate. As Millie looks down, he lifts her chin, declaring she is his person and he chose this fight. Her eyes hold his, while Hazel's gaze drops to their hands. Hazel grabs his sleeve, begging him to return before dawn. He promises that is the plan, squeezing her fingers. Hazel makes him repeat his exact escape route and timing. Lorna ties a dark scarf around his neck, pulling the knot tight enough to act as a silent warning. Millie slips the last piece of candy in his pocket for sweet backup. That candy defeated Brock once already, making her almost smile. But the warmth vanishes when he opens the door. He orders them to wake Earl if he fails to return, warning that no one should follow him. Hazel insists they will break that rule if he is late. Lorna pulls his scarf tight once more, calling it his best plan yet. For 3 days, he hunts by light and stakes out the yard. The first night reveals the guard dog. It barks at strangers but falls asleep after eating. The second night reveals the wall, topped with glass except near the pig pen, where a low mulberry branch leans close. By the third night, he knows their routine. Luther and Brock leave after dinner while Gloria checks the side lane, changes clothes, and locks up. The heavy trough still sits right where he remembers, waiting for him. Using his spring strength, he was short on sleep but had a route planned. Fatty meat would handle the dog, a wolf hide would cover the glass, while sweet potatoes distracted the pigs. His shovel waited inside the hidden homestead. Then on the fourth night, the snow began to fall. He watched the target from behind an empty grain shed across the lane. Luther and Brock were arguing in the yard while a cart waited outside. Brock pressed cloth against his healing nose. Rat had the shotgun now. Luther pulled on his coat. Royce would confiscate it, and once the gun was gone, they would move in to teach those women who owned the house. There it was, the gun that terrified Luther. Was the exact thing he planned to steal first. Brock asked when Royce would act. Soon Luther answered, saying tonight they would gamble. Father and son climbed into the cart and left for the protected gambling house. He waited until their carriage wheels disappeared. Gloria Fenley stepped out of the side door wearing a clean dress and way too much perfume for an empty house. A short, limping man slipped quietly through the gate. Gloria pulled him inside before he could even finish looking over his shoulder. Her husband went gambling while her lover arrived before the snow covered their tracks. Talk about a messy family. The door shut and a lamp moved upstairs. He waited another 5 minutes. Gloria could still return to check the gate, or her lover could still panic and bolt. Nothing moved except the fresh snow burying their deep footprints. Then a chair scraped upstairs, followed by low voices and another muffled laugh. Gloria was not coming down anytime soon. He quickly crossed the lane. The guard dog rose and growled. He crouched just outside its reach and offered the meat. The growl softened into hungry whimpers. He tossed the fatty strip beyond its chain. It sniffed, swallowed, circled twice, and settled directly onto the straw without making a sound. When he stood, its head lifted. He froze instantly, 1 foot off the path. The dog just watched him, licked grease from its muzzle, and lowered its head. Bribery worked on both sides of Luther's gate. He waited until the dog's breathing deepened. A barking dog would wake the neighborhood, while a harmed one would prove an intruder was here. He needed silence and 0 blood spilled. The back wall came next. Grabbing the wolf hide from his hidden stash, he draped it over the broken glass and climbed across. The hide protected his hands while keeping the glass intact. His boot lightly touched the wall on the way down, but snow cushioned the sound. He paused under the mulberry branch while Gloria's upstairs lamp finally stopped moving. The curtain shifted. He pressed tightly against the wall. The lover crossed the room carrying the light, then disappeared again. He had peeked outside toward the yard without spotting a thing. Inside the pen, the pigs heard him. All 3 shoved against the fence and began grunting. He quickly tossed sweet potato pieces into the far corner. The pigs attacked the bribe like desperate thugs. One climbed over another. The smallest squealed because nobody respected order. Gloria's window suddenly brightened. He froze, holding his breath. A muffled laugh drifted from the bedroom. The curtain stayed closed. The lamp moved away from the glass. The lover was keeping her distracted, buying him 1 more precious minute. He moved to the feeding trough. It was a massive stone basin packed with frozen slop. In his past life, regular men needed poles to shift this weight, but the spirit spring had already granted him immense strength. He gripped both ends, easily lifting and sliding the trough aside. Without a single scrape, the frozen ground waited underneath. He pulled the shovel from his. He reached the hidden homestead and started digging. First came roots and stones. He laid each clump on sacking so the snow would not mix with the dark earth. One sloppy pile could tell Luther where to look. A floorboard creaked. Upstairs, he froze, shovel halfway down. The lamp crossed the curtain once, then stopped beside the bed. Gloria laughed, and the floor went quiet again. The second layer was harder. His memory had the location right, but timing could still be wrong. The ledger might be smaller. The box might not exist. One wrong guess would leave a hole beneath Luther's pigs, and no weapon to justify the risk. A pig escaped the sweet potatoes and shoved its snout toward his shoulder. He pushed it away with one hand. It came back offended. "Don't commit corruption somewhere else," he whispered. The pig grunted at Him stepped on the loose soil. He moved faster, at roughly half a meter. The shovel struck metal. That sudden jolt, his whole body went electric. He stopped, listened. Upstairs, the bed frame creaked once. One pig chewed. The dog stayed quiet. Nobody shouted. He dropped to his knees, clearing the dirt. With both hands, an iron box sat beneath the trough exactly where an old investigation had found it years later. Future memory had survived the 10 gap. The old lock was rusted. Inside the hidden homestead, he forced the latch. With the shovel blade, oilcloth wrapped a thick ledger inside. Luther had protected it from water better than he protected the people whose lives filled its pages. The pages listed diverted grain, stolen land, cash payments, and a $3,000 bribe to Royce. 8 years of entries tied the cooperative office to people across Pine Glass County. Luther had buried his insurance under pig slop. He returned outside with the empty hole still waiting. The pig shoved his elbow. Again, he gave it the last sweet potato and bought 30 seconds of peace. Then he replaced the soil, pressed it flat, slid the trough back, and scattered dirty straw over the ground. He wiped the trough edge with old straw and stepped backward through his own prints. At the wall, he removed the wolf hide, checked the glass, and carried every tool into the hidden homestead. Nothing new remained except the missing box. The dog slept, the pigs ate. Gloria remained occupied upstairs. From wall to wall, the heist took about 15 minutes. He crossed the lane and did not look back. Back home inside the hidden homestead, he went through the ledger once. One entry matched Cecil Moreland's stolen land. Another paid Royce after a complaint disappeared. The remaining pages widened. The network, he had the proof. Tobias had to move before Luther noticed the empty ground. At dawn, he put the iron box on Tobias's desk. He looked at the mud under his nails, then at the box. Tobias asked if he found it. He replied he found pigs, sleeping dog, and a marriage with excellent timing. Tobias raised one eyebrow. Open the book, he told him. The family jokes write themselves. Tobias opened the ledger. His expression changed on the second page. Then he found Cecil Moreland's land entry and stopped turning pages. The amount beside Cecil's name matched the fee Clyde had described. By the fourth page, both hands gripped the book hard enough to bend the cover. He looked up, demanding, "Do you understand what you brought?" He answered it was 8 years of expensive handwriting. Tobias turned another page, noting this reached beyond Luther. He told. That was the exact plan. Tobias stood up so quickly his chair slammed against the wall. Checking the warehouse window, he locked the cabinet and quickly came around the desk. Tobias gripped the farmer's shoulders, asking if anyone had seen him leave. Just one dog, 3 pigs, and some man busy disappointing Luther upstairs. Tobias stared at him for a second, then looked back at the ledger, calling him either the bravest farmer in the county or the most dangerous. He was just setting the fire, he told Tobias, letting him decide where it burns. Tobias released him, locking the ledger inside a steel cabinet. The county bureau would not see this first. He was sending it above them, keeping a hand on the cabinet. Once this moves, Luther will know someone reached past Royce. The farmer knew Luther would suspect him. He replied. Tobias's jaw tightened. He might do more than suspect, he told Tobias. To move faster than Luther does. The farmer left the warehouse before sunrise. The ledger was safe with Tobias. Under Luther's pig trough, the iron box was gone. The moment Luther checked, every corrupt official around him would start looking for whoever took it. Back at the farmhouse that morning, he told the women the evidence was in safe hands. Millie heard that. By nightfall, she made the first move herself. Hazel checked the curtains. Lorna moved the wood axe. Beside the back door, Millie held a cup with both hands. He gave them the only truth they needed. Reliable people had the evidence, and Luther would soon know. It was gone. He warned them to keep the doors barred and never answer a stranger alone. Millie's cup trembled. This all started when Brock came for him. He took the cup before hot water reached her fingers, knowing Brock used him as an excuse. He told her he chose this fight. Millie searched his face, reminding him he called her his person. He confirmed she was, as Hazel and Lorna went completely still. Millie nodded once. Her cup still trembled. She stayed beside him, spending the rest of the day with Hazel and Lorna, sewing a loose button onto his coat. Every time he looked over, Millie caught him looking and glanced away half a second too late. Lorna caught the exchange, asking if she and Hazel should leave or if they were planning to stare until spring. Millie threw a spool at her, but Lorna caught it and bowed. That night after the house went quiet, Millie opened his bedroom door. She wore her green dress under a thick coat, hair loose. In his defense, he forgot every careful sentence he had prepared for dangerous conversations. Millie shut The door behind her, her hand stayed on the latch for a long second. She could still leave. He did not move toward her. Millie turned and crossed the room on her own, whispering she came because she wanted to, not owing him anything. He looked at her face instead of the dress, standing beside the bed and asking if she was sure. Millie stepped closer, saying yes. If they crossed this line, he was choosing her for life. He told her, her hands closed around his shirt. Tomorrow she could still choose him. He continued. Millie's eyes filled, but she smiled through it, telling him to stop. Making her wait, she rose onto her toes and kissed him first. Her hands stopped shaking. He kissed her back, then lowered the lamp and pulled the blanket around them, leaving the rest to just Millie and him. At dawn, Millie lay with her head against his shoulder and finally spoke about the marriage Edna had sold her into, revealing her late husband had never touched her. Millie had entered his room with no past experience and enough courage for both of them, and he held her hand. This is for life, Millie tells him, studying his face with deep intensity. She is searching for some hidden part of him that might suddenly disappear. She asks if he will send her away if Hazel or Lorna chooses him. Millie's grip tightens. Was last night just payment for the house? Never, he says. Never, Rhett replies, and her shoulders finally loosen as she looks up. Even when trouble comes, she worries, especially then. He promises to stay. She presses her face against his chest with a tearful, happy laugh. A sudden, heavy knock hits the bedroom door as Hazel's voice echoes from outside. She tells them they know they are awake. Millie goes bright red. They get dressed and open the door to find the other girls waiting. Hazel looks composed, keeping her jealousy organized, while Lorna is pure chaos. Lorna points her finger. She instantly accuses Millie of cutting the line. Millie clings close to Rhett's arm, insisting there was never any line. Hazel corrects her, revealing that they heard her sneak across the hall. They stayed in their room because last night belonged only to Millie. Rhett had only heard muffled whispers through the wall, but now they explain everything. Turns out all three sisters chose him. They swore to remain sisters, no matter if he picked one of them or all three. No betrayal, no fighting over who gets to stand beside him. They made this pact before the exam because he offered safety without demands. Millie looks guilty. Still, she insists she kept her word. Lorna glares back, saying she kept the promise but basically robbed the bank. Then she folds her arms, complaining that Millie skipped the schedule. Millie points out they do not even have a scheduling department. Lorna smiles and says they do now. Rhett has faced wild beasts. Yet none of those dangers compare to this chaotic domestic trap. Hazel steps forward first, grabbing his coat to kiss him slowly. When she pulls away, her cheeks are red, but she stays steady. She tells Rhett she chooses him too, but on her own terms. Before he can even process that, Lorna grabs his other side and kisses him. Lorna claims her turn is next, jokingly calling Millie a total thief. Millie holds his arm tight, arguing you cannot steal a willing man. Hazel grabs his other arm, warning him he must agree very carefully. Honestly, there are definitely worse ways for a guy to get cornered. But before noon, one of Brock's beaten henchmen arrives outside the house. He demands that Rhett kneel to Luther, return the money, and send Millie back. Darlene takes the threat inside. 10 minutes later, Martha arrives. She is not alone, bringing Rhett's 2 adoptive brothers with her. Martha is the greedy woman who raised Rhett to be unpaid labor. Her real sons got all the rewards his hard work bought. They march right through the gate Brock was forced to pay to fix. Curtis, the oldest brother, leads them, looking heavy from a spoiled life. Behind him is Darlene's husband, Benton, expecting an easy win. A few curious neighbors follow them, watching from a safe distance. Now Martha is bringing her muscle to finally get what she wants. He points right at Rhett, ordering him to go apologize to Luther Fenley Neal. Return Brock's money and send Millie back. Her hand immediately tightens. Around Rhett's, he steps forward. No, Curtis cracks his knuckles. Benton looks toward the shotgun locked inside the house. Martha notices his hesitation, knowing he would never use it on family. Rhett looks at her. You know I am. Not your blood. Martha's face falls. Curtis stops smiling while Benton looks at her instead of Rhett. Martha lowers her voice. Shut your mouth. Curtis looks. Between them, Benton's hands drop from his fighting stance. You found me. Abandoned as a baby, Rhett continues. You raised me for labor and handed your sons the land. Do not talk about blood when you know there is none. Curtis turns toward Martha, asking what he is talking about. Martha cuts him off with a sharp glare. Teach him respect. Curtis charges first. Martha screams, hold him down like before. Now the whole lane has heard how the brothers used to control him. Curtis rushes straight in without guarding his wrist. Rhett catches his fist, twisting his arm and drives him to one knee. His wrist comes out of place with a hard pop. Curtis screams. Benton swings from the left, but Rhett ducks and punches him once. Straight across the nose, Benton hits the snow on his back, hands covering his face. 2 brothers attacked and 2 brothers went down. The old hierarchy lasted about 4 seconds. Neighbors gather along the lane. Curtis kneels, clutching his wrist. Benton sits in the snow, blood dripping from his nose. Martha sees the crowd but chooses violence anyway, lunging past Rhett with both hands aimed right at Millie. Hazel steps between them and slaps Martha across the face. The sharp sound carries into the lane. Martha spins toward Hazel, but Millie grabs the broom and strikes Martha across the shins. Stay away from Rhett. Martha stumbles. Lorna hooks one foot behind Martha's ankle and shoves her shoulder. Martha lands flat in the snow. All 3 women move together before Rhett can even raise a hand. Hazel stands over Martha. Millie holds her broom across her chest. Lorna plants one boot beside Martha's skirt and dares her to rise. The lane instantly erupts. An older woman cheers Hazel's loud slap. A man who once called the widows unlucky steps beside their gate and blocks Curtis from rising toward them. Villagers who had watched these women lower their eyes for years now watch them, flatten the family dictator. As a team, absolutely beautiful. Martha tries to sit up and spits. You 3 belong in the dirt. Millie's broom lowers just half an inch. Hazel reaches her first with Lorna right beside her. Then Martha grabs for Rhett's coat. From the ground, Millie's broom snaps back across Martha's wrist. Stay away from him, Millie repeats. Her voice does not shake. Rhett stops where he is. Millie holds the broom between them. Enough, Rhett tells the women as Martha stops reaching. She understands the ground now. Lorna looks down. I'm not convinced. Before she can test that lesson again, Clyde Hatcher runs into the yard from the cooperative office. While Martha is still face down in the snow, Clyde brings news that ruins her entire argument. Luther Fenley has collapsed. Clyde announces a stroke. Half his body stopped working. Martha's face empties. Clyde points back toward the village center. His secret account book is missing. Gloria's affair came out in that same fight, and district soldiers raided the He bent over to catch his breath at the cooperative office, and they sealed it. At Luther's desk, half the cooperative stands outside, pretending they never cared for him. Later, official files revealed how Luther found a strange wall. Scuff moved the heavy trough and realized the box was gone. He accused Gloria, who confessed to the affair before he finished. The double shock collapsed him right where he stood. Hazel's eyes locked onto him. Lorna let go. Millie exhaled a quiet breath. Martha scrambled up. Just moments ago, she had demanded he surrender to the Fenley family. Now she backed toward the gate without looking at him. Curtis cradled his wrist. Benton followed, keeping his nose covered. Then Martha dragged her sons onto the road, shouting that they were leaving. He called after her for an apology, making her speed up. She had wanted him to kneel to Luther. Yet now she dragged both boys away with snow still clinging to her coat. Quite a spectacle. Excellent village gossip. Later that cold afternoon, the women cornered Millie right by the kitchen table. Hazel folded laundry with suspicious calm. Lorna leaned against the wall, grinning as if trouble had found a seat. Lorna teased Millie, asking if the quiet one took the first turn. Millie hid her face behind a laundry shirt. Rhett was far too much of a gentleman to intervene. Hazel looked at him, asking if that was his problem. He admitted having several issues. Lorna pushed away from the wall, happily claiming him for her own turn next. Millie quickly grabbed his right arm, protesting that Lorna could not just claim him like a blanket. Lorna grabbed his left arm, telling them to watch her. Hazel approached slowly and placed a hand on his shoulder, reminding them of their agreement. Lorna just smiled at her, calling it a negotiation. 3 widows had formed a peaceful alliance only to immediately trap him. He pulled free and headed straight for the door. Millie called out, asking where he was going. He told her to check the outdoor traps. Lorna joked that he fled them faster than wolves, which was true. He still escaped. Later on the porch, Hazel brought him warm porridge and asked if he had caused Luther's sudden collapse. He looked toward the empty road, explaining he gave the evidence to reliable hands, but could say no more. Hazel studied him, then nodded. You protected Millie, she whispered. Whatever comes, all 3 of them would stand behind him. She gently rested her fingers over his for one quiet moment, telling him not to confuse protection with carrying everything completely alone. He squeezed her hand, telling her to stay very close when the real danger arrived. Hazel stared down the dark road, promising they would. Indoors, Lorna playfully accused Millie of hiding his best shirt, though she denied it while wearing it. Before nightfall, he quietly checked his perimeter warning lines. He carefully set 2 split bamboo ankle traps deep under the snow along the paths to the porch. These could stop any intruder without lethal force, but Luther's dangerous backers were still out there entirely free. Daylight made Martha easy to handle, but at 3 the next morning those thugs arrived carrying heavy iron clubs, snapping his outdoor security wire right outside. In the dead of night, his silent trap had sprung. 3 violent men crept right through the front gate. He woke instantly, grabbing a double-barrel shotgun resting right beside his bed. The house was pitch black as snow scraped across the roof. Frozen in place, he counted each heavy step. 1 intruder stayed near the gate while 2 crossed the yard. Not a single light was lit. They clearly knew the layout well enough to move blind. These were no simple thieves. Someone had sent them. Suddenly, an iron club smashes into the newly repaired gate, splintering another board. The sharp crack reveals exactly where the first intruder is standing. Heavy boots are already marching toward the house. The tripwire signals to him that all 3 men have entered the yard. Their next steps will show him which trap each target has triggered. Across the hall, Hazel slips open the women's bedroom door. Lorna stands close behind her, clutching a wood axe, while Millie grips a broom with both hands. None of them look tired. Hazel has thrown a coat over her nightgown. Lorna's messy hair frames a determined, hard face. Millie plants her bare feet firmly on the freezing floor. Outside, a man whispers to spread out and take Winslow alive. The largest shadow creeps toward the side of the building, while the other 2 head straight for the front porch. He cracks open his shotgun, checks the shells, and snaps it's shut. Hazel sees the gun, insisting they stay, but he orders them to head to Earl's. If they stay, the thugs will use them as leverage. Hearing this, Millie freezes. Brock had already shown her how little men with orders actually value women. Hazel grabs his sleeve, asking what happens to him. He will hold the house, reminding her she said not to carry everything alone. Bringing Earl is her part. Her tight grip finally loosens. Hazel wraps the coat tighter around Millie while Lorna puts the wood axe down. Then Hazel pushes open the back window and climbs out first. Millie pauses right beside him. She shoves the broom into his free hand, suddenly changes her mind to take it back, and grabs his wrist, whispering for him to return. He promises he will eat breakfast. Millie brushes his hand one last time before Lorna pulls her out through the window. Hazel shuts it from the outside, and the 3 women vanish into the pitch-black garden. The men stalking his yard never even notice. Winslow slips into the women's room and stands behind the open door. Their blanket still holds warmth. The shotgun rests against his shoulder. Outside, an attacker reaches the porch path. The first hidden bamboo trap snaps shut. A man screams, crashing down hard enough to shake the entire front step as his heavy club hits the wall. The second attacker curses and rushes over to help, stepping exactly where Winslow anticipated. The second snare clamps violently around his boot and ankle. He collapses next to his comrade, clawing at the frozen ground. 2 heavy clubs, 2 effective traps. Both targets are neutralized before ever touching the porch. The final man offers absolutely no help. He simply freezes when both traps snap. Winslow hears him take one sharp, cold breath. Any normal leader would have immediately pulled his guys back. This monster treats their agony as proof the path is finally clear. He steps right through the side door completely alone. That instantly reveals who the leader is. He is huge, broad across the shoulders, and dressed in a bulky county coat with no visible law enforcement badge. An iron club dangles from his hand as he pushes inside, shouting for the county bureau, ordering Rhett Winslow to surrender. Winslow remains hidden behind the door. The intruder hears his partners screaming outside, but just keeps on marching forward. Whoever sent him valued sheer size over actual intelligence. He reaching the women's room, kicking the door wide. He demands to know where the widows are, sneering that once they drag Winslow out, maybe one of those women can keep him warm. He steps from behind the door, pressing the shotgun barrel directly against his forehead. His heavy iron club freezes midair. Winslow orders him to drop it, and the metal weapon clatters down. He commands him onto his knees, and the giant slowly complies, eyes darting to the empty bed. The man claims he is a real officer, but actual lawmen do not carry iron clubs. At 3 in the morning, his jaw tightens as his right hand starts to twitch. Eyeing the iron club on the floor, the shotgun barrel nudges lower, daring him to try it His hands instantly freeze. He presses the cold steel harder against the intruder's skin. Ordering him to put his hands behind his head, the fake officer quickly obeys. This fraud had entered to threaten women, but 30 seconds later, he is kneeling at gunpoint. Talk about a massive mistake. He grabs some rope from under the bed. He binds the leader's wrists tight before kicking the iron club out into the hallway. Shoving the intruder after it, he hears the other two men still screaming outside. One had torn his boot trying to escape, while the other had lost all fight. He drags their boss onto the porch, forcing him to kneel in plain sight. He orders the boss to tell his men to stop fighting the traps, receiving a nasty glare. Resting the weapon on his shoulder, he offers a choice of 3 living men. For 2 survivors and 1 warning, the boss quickly orders his men to freeze. They immediately lock up. The first attacker's face drains of all color. The second just stares at their leader, hoping he can somehow salvage the mission. But their boss cannot even stand without our main character's explicit permission. Realizing no help is coming, he loosens the bamboo traps just enough to save their feet. After taking their clubs, he binds their hands, leaving them helpless on the cold ground. He easily could have ended them all before they even touched the porch steps. Dead men tell no tales, and he needs the evidence they brought to his door. Keeping them alive is the smarter play. He hauls the leader up by his collar. Demanding a name, a quick shove to his knees forces out Rufus Keel. Rufus is their leader, now forced to kneel in the snow while his crew watches. When asked who sent them, Rufus tries to play the tough lawman card again. Claiming they only came to detain a thief, he gets a skeptical look in response. With a shattered gate and iron clubs, it is quite a beautiful detention procedure. He demands the real story, but Rufus stays silent until his partner starts cracking. One of the captured men begs Rufus to talk, earning a sharp order to shut up. Our main character lowers his second barrel, warning that the ledger is already gone. Taking his life won't bring the book back to Pine Glass County. His only real option now is naming the person who pulled the strings. Rufus's confidence shatters as he tries one last weak threat about the county roads. He calmly retorts that those very roads will be carrying his witnesses soon enough. Seeing the neighbors gathering near the gate, one trapped man hangs his head in shame. He finally confesses that Deputy Royce Kavanaugh sent them with orders to bring him in alive. They needed to uncover who held the ledger, prompting a question about the final plan. Rufus swallows, admitting they planned to steal his shotgun and search the place. They wanted to force a confession about the ledger and then take the women. His eyes drift toward the bedroom, and that is the absolute final straw. He slams the crook against the porch post, warning him that he targeted the wrong house. The terrified leader quickly repeats Deputy Royce Kavanaugh's name for everyone to hear. The neighbors listening from their doorsteps hear it too. 20 minutes later, help arrives. Earl slips through the back garden with Hazel, Lorna, Millie, and 2 local men. Hazel rushes over instantly, frantically checking his face and hands for injuries. Her trembling, cold hands scan him as he quietly assures her he is completely fine. She points out he said the same after the wolves, while Earl eyes the bound captives. Who sent them? He explained that Tobias had the ledger, and Royce sent those men. To capture him and find it, Earl's face darkened. The house was now in Royce's reach. The district compound was safe. Hazel looked around the farmhouse they had built. The women had scrubbed it clean, turning it into a home. Another raid would destroy it. They had to go, and Hazel made the decision. It lay folded beside the pot she had scrubbed on that very first morning. As she reached for it, Hazel grabbed her wrist. Grab your coat only, we'll return later. Millie nodded, leaving the pot behind. Lorna quietly checked the back window first. No one was following them. Millie counted the captives. She double-checked, then peeked into the room, finding untouched blankets. Seeing the heavy iron club sitting in the hallway made her breath catch as he stepped. Between her and Rufus, they never got near you, he reassured her. Millie nodded, grabbed her broom, and stood tall by Hazel as Rufus glared at them. But Lorna casually balanced his heavy club on her palms. Lorna asked where they were planning to go while Rufus stared silently at the floor. Lorna had already corrected his behavior with a quick lesson. Living witnesses are too inconvenient, she muttered. Earl studied the captives. Earl looked at the traps and asked when they had turned this place into a fortress. He joked that his front gate became a target far too often. The threat was over for now. They could finally laugh off the damage. Their mended clothes still hung by the warm stove as Millie grabbed her green winter coat. She threw it on while Lorna bolted the rear window against any future trouble. Earl and his loyal village allies kept watch over the prisoners inside. They stayed by the captives until Tobias finally dispatched a military truck to collect them all. All of them had heard Rufus name Royce. Before 4, Clyde prepared the cart. He hitched his ox cart outside. Hazel climbed onto the bench, holding the shotgun. He urged her to stay safely hidden, but she refused to leave his side in danger. She reminded him of his own advice. Millie peeked out from the canvas. She asked if the house would still be theirs, and he promised it always would. Lorna pulled Millie back inside, grumbling that she was not done cleaning yet. He realized there was absolutely no argument that could sway any of those stubborn women. With the women settled, Clyde whipped the reins to start the journey. They rolled past the shattered gate, riding in complete silence. They watched their home fade into the distance. It was their first sanctuary. Yet a crooked county deputy had already sent ruthless men to smash through its peaceful doors. Millie watched until the falling snow hid the roof. Lorna sat in silence. Hazel kept her loaded gun resting in her lap while the heavy silence stretched between them. They had a full confession now. They just needed to reach safe territory. The safe militia compound finally appeared through the snow. 2 gate guards spotted the shotgun on Hazel's lap and raised the barrier. They called for Tobias immediately as Clyde pulled the cart to a halt. Tobias was waiting with an open telegram, looking grimly at the arriving group. He told them they had made it in the nick of time before Royce could strike. The enemy moved before sunrise. Tobias placed a document on his desk. He showed them the official telegram authorizing their defense. Investigation above Pinellas County. That gave them one hard rule: Royce's county. Officers could not enter the compound and drag them back out. Millie studied the seal twice. He can't send another group inside. Tobias answered her directly. Not without challenging district command in front of armed witnesses. 2. Soldiers stood at the gate with rifles across their coats. Neither wore Royce's badge. Millie finally sat down. Hazel's hand loosened around Rhett's sleeve. Lorna stayed on a supply chest with her boots planted on the floor. The formal team arrives tomorrow morning, Tobias said. Royce has today to run. How soon can they move? Rhett asked. Tobias reached for his coat. He sent 1 squad to collect Rufus and the other prisoners from Earl. Another squad blocked the county roads. Then he took the secret ledger and left before daylight. Rhett had stolen that book. Rufus had named Royce. Tobias was locking every exit they had created. The women and Rhett waited in a heated storage room under guard, every cartwheel made. Millie looked toward the door. Hazel counted the soldiers changing posts. Lorna paced until a guard asked whether she planned to wear a trench through the floor. Depends how long your captain takes, Lorna replied. The guard decided. The floor could survive without further discussion. Later that morning, Tobias returned with snow on his shoulders and satisfaction. He was trying very hard to hide. He shut the office door and told them the whole chain, from his sick bed. Luther sent Brock to warn Royce. The ledger was gone and district soldiers had raided the cooperative office. Royce learned Tobias and Rhett were involved then. Sent Rufus to seize Rhett. When Rufus failed to report, Royce packed for what he called a family trip. His wife wore a traveling coat over her nightgown. His daughter carried 1 small case and kept asking why they could not use the front road. Royce answered, neither woman, keeping his eyes on the rear lane. Then he loaded trunks, suitcases, cash, gold, jade, antiques, his wife and his daughter for a permanent disappearance. When Royce opened the back door, militia rifles were already pointed at him. He raised his county badge, demanding who authorized this roadblock. Tobias looked at the luggage, family trip, or county business. Royce snapped. At 4 in the morning, Tobias asked. Royce kept talking, hoping one more order would lower the rifles. He threatened them, demanding names, and promised careers would end before breakfast. The soldiers did not move. Then Royce tried to pull 2 suitcases through the doorway at once. 1 slipped, the latch broke. Bundles of cash hit the snow first. Gold followed. A jade bracelet rolled beneath a soldier's boot. Wrapped antiques spilled against the step. Royce's salary could not explain 1 corner of the pile. The emergency reserve held roughly $300,000 in cash. Gold, jade, and antiques filled the other cases. The untouchable deputy had packed his own evidence and carried it to the door. Honestly, it is hard to fathom what he thought a quiet escape would look like. Royce ordered the soldiers to close the cases. Nobody moved for him. The nearest soldier pulled the broken suitcase away and started counting the cash. Then Tobias brought Rufus forward from the militia wagon. Rufus pointed at Royce, accusing him of sending men to seize Rhett Winslow over the ledger. Royce's wife looked at the cash, then at him. She stepped away from the doorway. His daughter let her own case drop and moved beside her mother. Royce had. He dragged both women into the escape, yet now neither stood close enough to touch him. Tobias opened the secret ledger, exposing Royce's bribery entries. Royce froze. He stopped hiding behind his badge, staring at Rufus, the ledger, the cash, and the rifles. His orders moved no one. Kneeling in the snow, Royce desperately denied everything. Rufus repeated the command. Tobias showed a ledger entry while a soldier lifted a cash bag. Of cold cash, Royce tried blaming Luther until his own initials appeared beside the bribe. He blamed Rufus until Rufus repeated his bedroom order word for word. Finally, Royce. Shattered, he confessed to protecting Luther's thefts, burying complaints, and taking bribes, even ordering Rufus to kidnap him. His confession exposed the rest of their network before the morning ended. Next, the soldiers marched straight to the Fenley house. Luther tried to hide behind his stroke, but the soldiers dragged him out on a stretcher anyway. Brock trailed them through the yard, weeping that he was only obeying his own father. He offered money and begged the soldiers not to take him away. The pathetic bride snatcher found religion the moment prison became a threat. Both Luther and Brock went from their beds straight into a military wagon before lunch. Tobias finished the report and looked at Millie, noting how Royce knelt before being taken. Millie asked if he knelt in the snow, and Tobias quietly confirmed it. Lorna leaned against the wall, saying he deserved it for sending men into their bedroom. Hazel's fingers finally let go of his sleeve. The corrupt deputy once had power. But by sunrise, not a single soldier would ever obey his orders again. The official team arrived next morning, finding every main target already detained. The ledger, Rufus, and Royce's own luggage sealed the tight trap he had sprung. For 3 days, he and the women stayed safely inside the military compound. They slept in borrowed rooms, ate from tin bowls, and watched the guarded yard. Millie woke at every bootstep, while Lorna constantly asked when they could finally leave. Hazel kept all 4 of them close whenever another door creaked open. Later, Tobias confirmed that Brock received an incredibly long prison sentence. Cedar Hollow would grow old without him, keeping their home safe from his greed. Royce and Luther never regained the power they once wielded. 3 days later, their statements were finished, and Clyde's cart finally carried them back home. People poured from their houses before the wheels even stopped at the entrance. Men who once watched Martha raid his table opened the road for them. Mothers brought their children close to watch the brave women return safely. Young men walked alongside the cart, including one who had carried Earl's warning. Another had guarded Rufus under the dim porch lamp, watching the road closely. Nobody called this a patrol because they didn't need to name it. Any future raid would find a crowded lane. An old farmer gripped his shoulder. They took Royce and Luther away, and the old farmer laughed in pure satisfaction. Then he joined the growing crowd behind their cart. Hazel sat up straight. Beside him, her shining eyes filled with relief as Lorna waved at their neighbors. Millie watched the children running beside the wheels, finally smiling without any fear. A neighbor who used to avoid Millie stepped forward to help her down. Holding her steady until she found her footing, she kindly offered her support. Asking if they needed bread, she warmly greeted Millie by her name. They no longer whispered widow. Soon, Hazel received 3 generous offers of help. Back at the house, Lorna accepted all 3 and assigned jobs immediately. Naturally, back at the farmhouse, the broken gate leaned against the wall again. 2 boards were split, the warning wire hung loose, and Millie touched the post. Do saviors get breakfast privileges? Not without work. Saviors repair gates, Rhett laughed. Lorna pointed, saying the title was his alone. Hazel studied the broken boards, teasing that he loved his exclusive status. He survived an armed raid just to get chore duty. Talk about a warm welcome. Home finally felt normal again. That afternoon, Earl and Irene arrived with 2 baskets. Irene was Earl's wife, the same woman who brought eggs after his slingshot. Victory, both baskets hit the table. 5 sparrows earned 1 basket. She reminded him, apparently breaking a network earned 2. Lorna lifted an egg, asking how many for surviving this household. Irene looked at Hazel. Millie and Lorna, he has not survived yet, they all agreed far too. Quickly, Earl waited for the laughter to settle, saying Cedar Hollow called him its savior. Rhett reminded him that the village sent help when their warning lines snapped. Returning only because Cedar Hollow answered, Hazel set an egg beside his hand. The people here came when they called. That was family, Lorna placed. Another beside it, showing up gets a seat. Millie added a third, saying people who shared breakfast kept it. She looked at him, warning him that rule was critical. He covered her hand, teasing that she had negotiated that rule quite aggressively. Millie smiled while Hazel rested a hand on his shoulder. Then, Lorna stole one of his eggs. Before the pot even reached the stove, just one messy, hungry, and heavily armed household. That evening, the villagers repaired the gate they had helped defend. Rhett had spent weeks turning game into food, cash, and safety to keep his household alive since the village had carried their warning through the snow, he told Earl his next big wild boar would not go to market. Earl looked at him. Where would it go then? To Cedar Hollow. The next morning, Rhett took his shotgun. The boar he found weighed 230 pounds. He could have sold it, but decided to feed the village for standing beside them. Fresh tracks crossed the lower ridge before noon. He followed them over frozen mud and through cut brush, ending in an oak flat where the massive boar tore roots from the ground. With the wind in his face, the animal never smelled him. It turned broadside once. He waited until the shoulder cleared and fired, dropping it with a single shell. The beast kicked twice, then lay still. He checked the ground, unloading his second barrel, placing his hand against the thick hide, a clean kill with plenty of meat to share. There was no reason to hide this carcass. At the illegal market rate, this animal was easily worth $2,000. The greedy merchant inside his head began screaming, but he ignored it. Leaving the boar visible, he called the wood cutters working below. Several young men from Cedar Hollow climbed up with poles and rope. None asked for payment. One of them had stood outside their gate after the attack by Rufus, and another repaired the post. They tied the animal to two poles and playfully argued over the heavier end. The thick wood bowed under the weight. Whenever a shoulder gave out, someone changed places. One young man slipped on the frozen trail, but 4 hands caught the carcass before it hit the snow. By the last slope, children spotted them and came running ahead, shouting that dinner was coming. He stayed in the light until the steep ground ended, prompting complaints that they should be supervising. He joked that elders have aching backs, and they made him prove it. By afternoon, they hauled the boar directly to the central village ground. The meat was divided by household size. 2 heavy doors laid across. Barrels served as their cutting table. Young carriers held them steady. Whenever a knife hit bone, parcels filled. Families began walking home. With dinner, everyone who stood by him received a share, but Martha did not. She had shunned him after his wife passed, ending her claim entirely. The very first share went to a mother of 4. She quickly wrapped the meat, giving the smallest scrap to her youngest son. Is this really for us? The boy asked. His mother nodded, looking up at him. They had not tasted pork all winter. The boy tried opening the cloth. His sister slapped his hand away, making their mother laugh while she tied the double knot. One family left with ribs, another took stew meat. 2 old farmers compared their parcels and declared the distribution fair. Only after finding a piece worth bragging about, for once, greed vanished. And Cedar Hollow felt cheerful. Hazel, Lorna, and Millie worked nearby. In the new dresses he bought, Hazel wore blue, Lorna red, and Millie green. Every single thank you made Millie stand a little straighter. Hazel showed a mother how to stretch ribs with potatoes. Lorna carried the heaviest parcels to the elderly and came back demanding more. Millie monitored the kids so no house took 2 shares. A boy tried sneaking behind the table for seconds. Millie caught his sleeve and checked his mark. She sent him back to his laughing mother empty-handed. An old woman who once called Millie cursed asked her to weigh a parcel. Millie adjusted the wrapping, added extra fat, and handed it back. The woman thanked her by name. Another mother warmly thanked the hunter for feeding her children. Hazel's eyes shined with warmth. Lorna nudged Millie toward the departing families, and Millie smiled proudly. All around them, people thanked the women just as much as him. The village that once whispered about 3 cursed widows now asked Hazel how to cook the ribs. Lorna handled the heavy lifting, while Millie guarded the tally. Lorna teased that he had given away everything. Hazel glanced over. Good thing we kept the hunter around, she teased, which sounded suspiciously like ownership. He smiled, admitting it was fair. He fell right into that trap, and things were about to get messy. The boar was. Darlene Winslow reached the edge of the crowd. Darlene was Benton's wife. Bitter gossip whose affair he had exposed right beside his rabbit table. She counted the parcels once, checked the marks, and counted again. No Winslow share existed. Her face twisted. She could have walked away. But she lacked that kind of grace. Instead, she sprinted toward Martha's house. The smell of free meat reached Martha before the last rib left. 10 minutes later, Martha arrived with Curtis and Benton, those same two brothers he had already beaten down in the snow. A neighbor asked what miracle was happening. Had suddenly healed Martha's back. Apparently, the word free had real medical value. Curtis still wore a wrist splint. Benton's nose remained swollen. Neither injury stopped them from reaching for Rhett's property. They pushed through the crowd, stopping at the cutting table. Martha pointed at the remaining meat, 2 shares, one for Curtis and one for Benton. Curtis slammed his good hand on the cutting table. Benton hovered behind him and watched the crowd instead of the meat. Families walking home suddenly stopped at the edge of the clearing. Earl stood behind the table, refusing to reach for the knife. The blade stayed put, and so did the last share. Rhett stepped forward. No. Martha's eyes widened, as if this was their first food argument instead of their fourth. I raised you, she snapped, insisting everything he learned came from the Winslow house. He shot back, you taught me to hide potatoes. Several villagers laughed. Martha ignored them, claiming his brothers owned the family land and his Hunt supported the family. Rhett pointed toward Curtis's splint. They own the land because she gave them what his labor bought. She cut him out after his wife died, keeping the property while he kept the funeral debt. Benton looked at the wrapped shares on the ground. The whole village received meat. Yes, Rhett told him. The whole village stood with them. Curtis took a step toward the table. His injured hands stayed against his chest. Curtis asked if beating them once changed who he was. Rhett stepped between him and the meat, declaring it changed what happens when they reached. Curtis stopped, and Benton tried another route. Their mother is old, Benton whined. You would let her go hungry. Rhett pointed at the parcels already leaving the clearing. She has 2 sons with land, houses and livestock, so feed her. Benton looked at Curtis. Curtis looked at Martha. None volunteered meat from their own stores, and the crowd noticed. 2 young men set their knives down and moved beside the table. Mothers pulled their parcels behind their skirts. Even Curtis saw the village had stopped treating this as private family business. Earl started to mention the recorded separation, but Rhett raised his hand, saying his answer was still no. He faced Martha and his brothers, reminding them they abandoned his wife and took his labor. When the dead arrived, they cut the family apart. The boar was his, and they would receive nothing. Martha looked around for support. Families held meat he had given them. The young men who carried the boar moved closer to the table. One mother placed herself between Martha and her children's share. A man near Curtis asked why the brothers needed Rhett's boar when they owned the best fields. Curtis told him to mind his business. The man lifted his parcel and replied it became his business when Rhett fed his house. Martha's public claim was failing. Then Hazel stepped in front of Rhett. Lorna moved beside her. Millie took the other side. Earl stepped back from the cutting table. The young carriers made room without being asked. 3 women formed a line between Rhett and the family that had treated him as labor. Hazel stood in the center, shoulders straight. Lorna planted one boot ahead of the other, ready if either brother moved. Millie stayed beside them, even though Martha's voice had once made her hide. On their first winter night in his house, they stood behind him. Now all 3 blocked Martha's path. He stepped back half a pace and let them speak. Hazel confronts Martha. Rhett owes you nothing. Lorna stands tall, hands on her hips. You stole his past. Keep away from what he builds now, Lorna warns. Millie raises her chin, demanding she leave their family alone. Martha glares at the 3 blocking her. Losing the meat argument, Martha pivots and screams, family, you 3 are just wicked fox spirits. Martha screams they are fox spirits, silencing the room. She points at Hazel, Lorna, and Millie. Every home that took you ended in death. You are husband-killing curses, she spits. Millie had faced Brock's gang and Rufus's midnight raid without flinching, but this sentence makes her fingers numb, her face emptying as her hand drops from the table. 2 families had already cast her out over that same accusation. Hearing it here before the village makes her freeze. Some villagers look away. A mother shields her child. A man stops chewing and stares at Millie with deep suspicion. Hazel grabs her hand as Lorna takes her right. Do not fear, Millie, Hazel whispers. We have a man behind us.